Good evening. I think we're ready to call. I've been signaled that we're now live, so to call the meeting to order. Our meeting this evening is of the Dublin Architectural Review Board. For those of you here in the audience, this meeting is also being live streamed. You can access this meeting or videos of this future meetings on the city's website. For those of you who might be watching, this meeting's occurring at 5555 Perimeter Drive. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of the staff, then the applicant. The board will then hear public comments from the podium. Each speaker must provide their name and address for the record. Following public comment, including those that have been submitted by email, the board will deliberate prior to rendering a decision. We start all of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please stand and face the flag. Lori, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Mr. Jewell?
Here.
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Ms. Damiser?
Here.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to accept the documents into record and approve the minutes from our meeting of October 26th?
I'll make a motion to accept those documents.
Second?
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Damiser?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Our board is responsible for the review of construction, modifications, or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under zoning code section 153.170. There are no cases eligible for the consent agenda this evening. We have the decision-making responsibility in all cases. Anyone who intends to address the board on cases this evening must be sworn in. So if those of you who are going to address us, would you raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Our first case is an informal case. It's for 83 South High Street. This application is a request for the addition and remodel of a two-story building on a 0.15 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is located southwest of the intersection of Everly Hill Lane and South High Street. Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is indeed 83 South High Street. The board heard a related informal review in September, so this is a follow-on from that case. As you might remember, the site is just north of Penny Hill Lane on South High, and Mill Lane is at the back of the property. The site was previously used for commercial purposes. There was a shared parking lot easement, shared access easement along the back of the property. And while the pavement still exists, the easement does not. That was removed in 2017. The owners now wish to convert this to their personal residence. The site is within the Historic South District, and the same district is to the north, south, and east of the site, with historic residential to the west. This is the Giles Weaver residence, built about 1830, and it's noted as contributing. The existing detached garage off of Mill Lane, which we'll see in a moment, dates from about 1940. And note the porch details on the left and then the salt box roof form on the right. The left photo here shows existing conditions on the south side and the proximity to another residential structure. The right photo shows the rear of the house where the existing porch would be removed to make room for the addition. And just a little bit more context on the rear of the house. And then the carriage house, as previously mentioned, off of Mill Lane is proposed to be used as a home office. So the board did provide feedback in September, and by way of comparison, since then the lot coverage has lessened by 2.3%. The building size has lessened by 185 square feet, although it's still slightly beyond what the board could allow as a waiver. The length of the building is 8.5 feet less. The width of the garage has increased by 2 feet, and the height of the garage has decreased by 8 inches. Here we see the current site plan with the original house outlined in blue. The additions are seen to the left. And again, the garage off of Mill Lane is not being altered. And this shows a little bit more of the context with the adjacent structures. The size, form, and massing of the garage addition was a topic of discussion in September. So here you can see the difference with the proposed changes with the current on the right side and the previous on the left. And that chart that we just looked at encompasses all those changes that were made. These are the massing models as seen from South High Street, looking in both directions. And this is the massing as seen from Mill Lane in both directions. Preservation Designs Limited had a number of comments, and they are best seen on this particular graphic. They thought that the hyphens here should be enlarged for a more distinctive break between the existing and the new structures. They suggested lowering the cricket on the salt box roof for lesser impact on the historic portion of the structure. They also thought that the laundry room jog could be somehow better integrated. And overall, their suggestions were to simplify the structure so that it is a little bit more easily distinguishable from the historic. For example, slightly adjusting the siding and the roofing materials so they don't match exactly. So discussion questions tonight are before you. Would the board support the maximum 20% waiver for the additional square footage? Is the board supportive of the proposed massing and form and their response to the guidelines, the original structure, and the feedback in September? Does the board support the further recommendations regarding roof forms, increased hyphen sizes and materials, and then any other considerations from the board? And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any initial questions for Sarah? Mr. Taylor, would you like to?
Thank you. Good evening. Rich Taylor, 48 South High Street, Dublin. Thanks again for letting us be heard in an informal review. These are always very helpful to us. The changes that Sarah's talked about are almost all in response to the comments from the board from our last meeting in September. And primarily, I think Mr. Cotter's comment, one of them was about the orientation of the gable of the addition, and we rotated that 90 degrees, which was actually worked out better in a lot of ways. And that's what helped create that separation that that Sarah called a hyphen between the old and the new. I don't think we could increase that any without destroying the functionality of the floor plan, but that's a separate issue. We also reduced the length of the house overall by, I think, 8 feet or 6 feet. I think it's 8 feet. and then reduce the size of the house significantly in terms of the footprint of the house on the site. The drawings that you're seeing tonight, I did drawings that are more to scale and more detail, so that you get a better idea of what it's really going to look like when it's finished. If the board were to allow the 20% over the 1,800 square foot, that would be 2,160 square feet, and I've got 2,188 on the drawing, and if I have to take 28 square feet out, I can do that without a problem. So we can get to that number without an issue. And that's really all I have for you tonight.
Any initial questions, Mr. Taylor?
Maybe just one, because it comes up is certainly from the new, let's say the new edition, and in the drawing, it's the same color. It's essentially the same, I think Sarah brought up. The color and the siding is the same. Is that the final intent? Because certainly in the code says somehow we have to be able to, okay, it looks different, but do you have the intent of that all being siding, same color?
I wouldn't have any problem with doing something different back there. Yeah.
So I think that would help find a way to say, okay, this is definitely a different, okay. So for me, it would be one thing. Somehow it has to be, I think we've pushed people to make sure we're clear that it's a different, it has a different era to it, and it's clear.
I have no issue with that at all. That'd be fine.
Sarah, do we normally provide those recommendations from the preservation folks to the, they get that same letter or memo that we got from PDL?
Usually we summarize it.
Okay, that's good enough.
Sometimes we will pass it along verbatim.
And anything in that staff report is in public record, so.
Yep.
I have read it.
They.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you were aware of it. And
Yeah.
okay.
I don't agree with it, but I did read it.
Okay.
Could you go into how you don't agree with it? You just, you mentioned earlier that enlarging the hyphens would be a problem. Could you give us more
Yeah.
detail?
Sarah,
As
can
well
you
as,
Can you
what's
put the
that
floor plan up?
roof? The cricket, is that what it's called?
Well, I think two different things. The little hyphens, I think the wrong word to use in this instance, but we're talking about, do you have a pointer? Okay. So the little indented space.
So looking at this space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one on the opposite side is what she's calling a hyphen. And it basically is a narrowed section that allows the roof forms to change and for the gable on the two sides to be distinct. And I mean, the only way to make that smaller would be to push it farther away from the house, which would make the house bigger, which we're trying to avoid. And given that the location of this, where it is, it's not visible from the street at all, and it's much narrower than the existing house, I don't think it's necessary to do that. As far as the cricket, since it's going to be a metal roof, we can definitely lower that. Again, it's not visible from anywhere, and I know that's not a criteria, but it isn't. But that could easily be lowered because of the metal roof, so no problem with that.
And just from the roofing standpoint, because I know in the report they asked, okay, changing the roofing material, it's standing seam to metal roof anyways. I'm not.
Yeah, we could do something else.
I'm not sure what it would be, and I don't know, but certainly trying to find a way. I have to admit, I don't know what that would look like if it was.
Well, I mean, obviously standing seam's a very high level material and long lasting, and that's the reason I'd like to do
clear.
that. So maybe a different color, or we could do a different panel size on it or something like that to distinguish it from the what's up there now.
Because I tend to agree. I mean, the hyphen moving it around, and now now we get into the same spot. If you make it something different, then we're going to have to find space someplace, right? If we make it bigger. Yeah.
And you had also mentioned you felt that if we could get down below 20, you could find some space in that. Where were you thinking that's going to come from?
So if a room is 12 by 12, we make it 11.8 by 11.8. It doesn't really affect the room very much, but it does take square footage out. So we could kind of, squish it here and there, but 28 feet is something we can definitely take out of that. I didn't understand that the 20% was actually codified. I asked Sarah about that last week. And since it is, we have to be no more than the 20%, so we can definitely take space out.
Sarah, two questions. Was there any public comment? First question.
No, there wasn't.
Okay. Second question, because I think if they absolutely felt they needed to go beyond the 20%, they would apply for a zoning variance. Now, that board usually asks us for a recommendation.
I would have to check that. We were talking about that regarding another case this week. I would have to check that.
Because I would think since it's a part of the zoning code and they want to depart from that, that would be the procedure. But let's maybe go through, since we've had some initial comments, let's go through the four points here. Are we comfortable with the waiver for the 20%? Because Mr. Taylor's indicated that if we gave him the 20%, he could reduce the square footage and bring it within that. Sean, you're shaking your
I'm
head.
okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm okay, because I think it didn't, otherwise you can't make sense of it
I'm
without giving
fine.
something.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too. And I actually walked the site this afternoon and it seemed to be in line with the neighboring buildings. So.
Okay. Okay, so I think we're all fine with that. How about and this is, we've talked a little bit about the hyphen here, the massing form, and how we feel it complies with our guidelines.
Like I say, it appears he's, with the recommendations that was made from PDL. I mean, I think those are good recommendations. Sounds like that's workable. So I think that makes that help with the mass, and then the switch of the roof and the gable, that really helped as well. So, yep, I like it.
I agree.
I agree also. I think there was the one comment about that small indent from, was it the laundry room, that had a small roof angle in there that for me looks a little bit unusual in that one spot. I don't know if that's something that you need to have stay, but I'd say that one small, I don't know, that little roof that's there for me could go away, but the rest of it for me is fine. Yeah.
And the other thing is too, that's not noticeable from High Street as
Yeah,
well.
it's
So
from the
it's behind the
it's
property.
from the
So,
back, yeah.
yep.
And I'm pretty much comfortable with the massing. I think the intent of her comment with the hyphens is already met by setting the building back on the south side. So the goal of differentiating the addition from the primary volume of the house is already met. So I think that is more important than increasing the size of those hyphens. I also think some of the other comments, if the materials change more, the intent of making it different from the original house, because some of your new homes, you've decided to make them look like they have additions by differentiating materials. So here's an opportunity to do it really with an addition. So I think if the materials change, then that intent that's, I think, implicit in her comment about the hyphen is met as well. And I do agree. I think lowering, because with the metal roof, you don't have the slope limitation. So dropping it down, I think would reinforce some of those thoughts. Any other comments? Sarah, are there other things the staff thinks that we should address on this?
No, I think this is a good set of direction and we appreciate it.
Did that help you, Mr. Taylor? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, case two. These are two new cases. In these particular instances, if we do end up voting on something, because there are only four of us here, for a motion to pass regarding these cases, three have to be in the affirmative. If it's a tie, then the particular issue or motion will not go forward. Our first case is development at 3638 North High Street. This is a final development plan. And let's see. Okay, it's a request. Sorry, too many papers. This is a request for construction of a two-story mixed-use building, residential building on 0.25 acre site, zoned historic district, historic core. The front building is two-story. The site is located at the northeast of the intersection of North High Street with Wing Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. Sarah, looks like you're all ready.
And good evening again. Thank you for the introduction. Before us tonight for 3638 North High Street, we actually have three separate request. We have the final development plan, a parking plan, and a waiver. So as you mentioned, the site is here located in yellow at the northeast corner of North High and Wing Hill Lane. The buildings that were previously approved for demolition are identified with the orange star, although they're not allowed to demolish yet, pending this approval tonight. The blue star indicates where the privy and the historic wall are located on the site. And that is subject of another application that staff is currently reviewing right now. The site is zoned Historic District, Historic Core, and it's surrounded by the same zoning except on the east side where we have Historic Residential. This project has been through the typical major project review steps, and most recently in July of this year, this board saw the preliminary development plan, the parking plan, and some waivers. And at that time, 2 waivers were approved, one for a Juliet balcony and one for no foundation plantings along Wing Hill Lane. The parking plan at that time was tabled based on board feedback to adjust the parking lot. And tonight, with the final development plan, we're at that last step in the process. Taking a look at existing conditions, here we see both the front and the back of the buildings. The lower left photo shows the historic privy and steps and wall system. Here are some more photos along North High and Wing Hill Lane for additional context. And I'll just highlight some updates to the project since you saw it at preliminary development plan. The project now has 85% lot coverage, which is the maximum permitted by the code, so no waivers are required for that. The parking has been reduced to address board discussion at the PDP and now includes 4 on-site spaces for the mixed-use component, 4 tuck-under spaces for the residential. And as we saw previously, we still have public ADA space on North High. And then the bike parking was moved to the central parking court. This area allows greater turning movements within this parking court area. I will note that it's the first time that staff really gets to look at final grades, and staff does have concerns about the steepness within the parking lot, so you'll see a condition of approval that's recommended to address that. Moving on, we have street trees along Wing Hill Lane have actually been removed with this application. This is per direction from City Forestry. So this is the subject of the waiver tonight, along with street trees that would normally be required along North Blacksmith Lane. The mixed-use building's trash is now adjacent to that building. The applicant has confirmed that Rumpke will pick up from North High Street. And as previously mentioned, the adjacent historic wall is now in for review, and that is to stabilize and or rebuild that wall, which is a necessary part of this bigger development. There's a recommended condition of approval regarding the timing of the demolition of the buildings relative to this wall approval, since they are so closely linked. This is the character and the details of the buildings as proposed for North High Street. It is the same as seen at preliminary development plan. And again, this is the mixed-use building. And this graphic provides a more detailed look at the elevations, and we see here the horizontal siding on the north portion of the building, The windows linked using vertical details that match the surrounding materials. The gabled building has awnings on the first floor, and we see the vertical fenestration elements on the north building as well. The Wing Hill elevation shows the stone water table, the brick body, limestone vertical and horizontal detailing elements. And then here, just note the Juliet balcony that was the previous subject of an approved waiver. And by the way, we have all of these materials up front for your viewing. The interior or east elevation of the mixed-use building shows the integration of the existing historic stone wall system and foundation, the limestone water table, brick and horizontal siding on different sections, vertical details, and then a rear access door with an awning. There's actually a matching one that sits 90 degrees to this one in that little nook. This is the north elevation, which is adjacent to number 40 North High Street, or the dentist's office. And we see again the horizontal siding, the vertical wood details, the rear deck and access where that door is. And what is new here is the trash enclosure. It's stone on two sides, attached to the building on the third side, and then the fourth side has painted cedar doors. Going through the materials for this building, we see the rusticated limestone veneer for the foundation or water tables, brick in Belden Yukon blend for the south portion of the building. And I believe we have a condition that states that this needs to be full depth brick and not the thin brick. Smooth limestone cladding for the window details and vertical elements. Horizontal wood siding for the north portion, and that's painted bungle house blue as shown. Standing seam metal roof in gunsmith gray. The awning on the north portion is sunbrella fabric in alloy steel. And then the windows, which are a mixture of casement and fixed windows, and the doors are all Marvin Signature Ultimate with an ebony exterior finish. We'll have more graphics on that shortly. Moving on to the residential building, this is the character on North Blacksmith Lane. And taking a look at the elevations, we see the limestone water table again, the horizontal siding, recessed balconies and entries, and vertical wood details to organize the groupings of windows. The north elevation is similar with the stepped water table and the vertical details that again organize the windows. The interior or west elevation, and this is facing the parking court, has the tuck under garages, and these are now single doors, as discussed at PDP, to aid maneuverability in the parking area. And again, we have the vertical organization of the windows and the stone water table. And finally, the south elevation, again, the stepped water table and the vertical details. Proposed materials include the same limestone for the water table as in the mixed-use building, horizontal siding in grapey and paved stone, doors in the Roycroft adobe, which is kind of that clay color. The vertical siding pieces in the window openings are Randolph gray, which is a kind of a dark gray. And then standing seam metal roof in gunsmith gray again, and the same windows in the ebony finish. Here's a little bit more information on the windows. Again, these are Marvin Signature Ultimate, encasement fixed and sliding, finished in ebony on the outside. The doors include Marvin Signature Ultimate commercial doors for the mixed-use building, True Style residential doors on the townhomes. These are wood with side lights. And then for the garage doors, those are CHI overhead doors, and those will be painted. The bike racks are proposed as shown, except in a bronze finish. And then moving on to lighting. The lighting style is appropriate to the building. It's fairly neutral and not trying to be too historic, which is a good thing. The first fixture is an up-down light proposed for the front of the mixed-use building. There are 8 total fixtures proposed on the front. There's a few hot spots on the north side of the building, and we believe that that could be fixed by eliminating one of those fixtures. There are 4 additional lights shown at the rear of the mixed-use building. The second fixture is for the front of the residential building. The third fixture is within each residential entryway as kind of a soffit light, if you will. And the fourth fixture is for over the garage doors. All of the fixtures are full cutoff and they meet our criteria. And a condition of approval is recommended to address just some minor outstanding issues. At the preliminary development plan, the board added a condition of approval to further explore the window, door, and building trim elements. And we talked with the applicant about that. They provided additional explanation of the design intent in the narrative, although chose not to change the design. So staff was curious about how the condition might be met. And so we explored some concepts which are presented here for consideration, discussion, comparison. And we had 3 major goals in creating these. We wanted this building along North High to be most compatible and contextual with the most important street in historic Dublin. We also wanted to de-emphasize the verticality of the buildings since they are adjacent to other single-story buildings, and most buildings on that block are relatively low in height. And quite frankly, we wanted it to look a little bit less like Cohatch in its detailing. We love the Cohatch building. It's a special location with a special function, and it kind of bridges the gap between Bridge Street District and the Historic District. So we wanted something that could maybe be more appropriate to the district on the whole. So to that end, we looked at removal of the vertical elements except in the end gables. We explored windows with more historic proportions and details and perhaps the use of transoms. We looked at adding horizontal elements, including a water table cap on both buildings and horizontal trim detail on the north building. And finally, on the northwest corner of the north section, we raised the window to a more traditional height relative to the water table. These are the side and rear elevations using the same concepts. We see the windows and the details that I previously mentioned. And here, staff supports the addition of bricked-in windows on the rear side to add more detail in that blank wall area. Moving on to the parking plan, this project requires 44 vehicular spaces total. 9 are provided on the site as previously described. And the off-site resources include 50% of the library garage that's within the required 600-foot radius, and that equates to 90 public spaces potentially available, and then 103 potentially available spaces at the Darby lot. So staff supports the parking plan as presented. And please note that there are 4 bike parking spaces required and 6 have been provided. Taking a look at our one waiver tonight, this is to allow no street trees on Wing Hill and North Blacksmith Lanes. Normally, these are required by code, but as previously described, City Forestry really advised against it with fear that AEP would come along and top the trees because of the overhead utility lines. Based on the fact that we have good verge landscaping proposed in both locations, staff is comfortable with this waiver. So all criteria for the waiver have been met or are not applicable. Regarding the final development plan, the criteria are either met with conditions, or not applicable. And finally, staff recommends approval of the parking plan, approval of the waiver for the no street trees, and finally, approval of the final development plan with conditions as in your staff report, plus an additional condition that says the Yukon Blend brick shall be full depth. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions. And the applicants are here tonight. They also have a presentation.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Any initial questions?
I do. Sarah, can you go back to the proposed site plan? It's several slides in the beginning there.
Sure.
Since I wasn't here for discussion the last.
There we go.
Yeah, so with the location of the privy and the steps to the privy, and then it says concrete to remain, is that brick wall still underneath there going to be and remain intact that's up against the privy steps? Because it just says concrete to remain, but there's actually a stone wall there.
There is a stone wall there, and I'm going to let the applicant talk in more detail about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
We have a number of different layers of stone wall. Some of it was deemed to be not historic, so that will come out. There is a lower level of the large sandstone blocks that will stay. And that's kind of running in that area, but I'll let the applicant answer that.
Yeah, because I'd just like to know more, because it's literally the sidewall of the steps going up to the upper level. So I have a question about that. That's it.
Mr. Lai, would you like to come up? And anybody else on your team who's going to be a part of your presentation?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim. Do I need the address? 401 West Town Street, Columbus. Let's see. How do we do that, Sarah? Do we have a slideshow here? Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Let me pull that up for you now.
Sure. So first of all, I want to apologize for this presentation. I know that, you guys' times are precious, and I normally kind of launch into this long kind of speech about the design, and I sometimes feel like it's hard to follow. So today I try to prepare something visual so that you can actually kind of look at it while I talk. And one of the main reason why we're trying to do this tonight is really we started this project last October, so it's been more than a year, we always try to, come in the project and we try to understand the site, try to understand what are we trying to do, and more importantly, also understand what the design guideline actually says from a from a principal level and try to understand the intent of that as a new construction. And so, unfortunately, at the end of this process, we still have a fairly big kind of gap with the staff in terms of some of the elevation, the design that we've been showing you guys. And obviously, so I want to take your time, apologize. I know this, could take a little bit of time, but to kind of just look at some of these things so that we are on the same page when we're talking about what is appropriate, what is actually the code says that we should follow. So let's jump right into that. Hopefully you guys don't mind. So I think the first thing that we kind of look at about the historic design guidelines, chapter 2, talk about the architectural style of historic Dublin. And one of the first things that it says in there is that it lists out about 12 different styles, anywhere between Federal to Gothic Revival to Greek Revival to Queen Anne to Italian Age, Craftsman, Art Deco, Modern, you name it. But the very first one it says is vernacular. Vernacular is by far the most prevalent style of architecture in historic Dublin. They are influenced by local climate, available building material, ethnic building tradition, rather than by kind of the high style, the architectural style. So, which we still have some of those, but very, very stripped down, and obviously not what you would see in some other cities. So that's the first thing I want to kind of get out. So if we go to the next page, so just quickly look around, Dublin. I think one of the things that I've been working, in Columbus for 20 plus years, in Dublin for 10 years with different things. And so would consider myself fairly familiar with, the historic core of Dublin, walking up and down the streets all the time. And one of the buildings I, really, really like is the 16th North High Street, not too far from our building, actually. It's a 1.5 story stone building, and it looks, it's a kind of quintessential historic Dublin, kind of characters, as you will. But the funny thing about historic style is that we tends to, when we think about it, when we hear about the word historic, we kind of have this image in our head, about certain things. And then when you actually look at this building, you realize that those ideas not so clean, it's not so perfect, and there's all this idiosyncrasy, there's all this quirkiness to it. So, for example, if you look at this building, it looks okay, it's a normal building, it's built probably before the turn of the 20th century. But then you look at it, all the windows are not the same size, as you can see. Some of them has headers actually on the stone, and some of them don't. Some of the header actually is not lined up. If you look at the two doors, actually, in the middle, one of them has a header that looks like a normal header. The other one actually is not a header, that they actually have a different way to support it. I'm not sure how. A lot of those windows doesn't have projected seal as so-called required by our staff. So it's a very interesting kind of building if you actually pay attention, look close enough to it. So let's go to the next one. So this is actually we call it the John Sells house on 6 South High Street, which I'm sure you guys have seen as Donato Pizza. But the funny fact about this building is it was actually, so John Sells, is the founders of Dublin. And this is a house that he built for his daughters as a wedding gift. And his daughter's husband, eventually became the mayor of Dublin in the 1940s. And so if you look at this house, it's actually a very typical stone house. And then, later on they added the one-story addition to that. But if you look at the window is not actually spaced evenly, if you look at it on the side. And also there's a big blank wall on the second floor that probably, our preservation consultant would not approve. But it's there. This is historic Dublin. This is all this little quirkiness that if you don't pay attention, you actually just miss that, altogether. Now go to the next one. Now this one, obviously, we all know is completed in 2009. So this is, what we'll call a new traditional. It's a more prescriptive. It's kind of like the perfect kind of almost style that we'll call traditional, design in a contemporary modern time. And one of the things is that, it's nice, but it's almost too perfect. It doesn't really tell you what time period is actually is built, but it's, you know, it's there. And this is one way, you know, to do that. If you go to the next one again. It's going to the south side again. So the historic core in Dublin, obviously, the majority of the really nice old building is south of Bridge Street. So this one, I really kind of find it very interesting. It's right next to the Intelligent next door, 35 South High on that alleyway. And again, look at all the windows. All the windows are different sizes. Some of them are oversized, some are smaller. There's a stucco at the back. There's you know, board and batten in the front. The window on the stucco building, there's no trim on it. There's no seal. There's a little seal, but there's no trim. There's no header on it. So again, very kind of interesting characters, I think. Go to the next one. Now this one is not a very successful attempt of a Tudor revival style, built probably in the 70s. It's a mixed-use kind of office, professional office building or some kind of retail building. And I would say that, first of all, the massing is not quite right. Doesn't fit really into Dublin, right? It's very big. It has a parking lot in front. It just doesn't really work. There's no window facing the street. The window is not, you know, it's not enough window, I think, in general in storefronts. So it's just, you know, it definitely, you know, it's unfortunate that it didn't really work, even a try. So let's go to the next one. So this is the famous privy, right, that we are dealing with on our site that we cannot touch. It's right there in the middle of our site on the north side. And it really is fascinating piece of structure, if you think about it. You know, it is a two-story structure, if you will, with all these stone with different colors, different shape, different size, and it just come together. And one of the cool things is that they have these terracotta tile kind of columns, if you will, posts that I'm always amazed that it actually doesn't collapse, you know, and it's there, like two of them, kind of supporting that concrete slab off the roof, and that, I think that's kind of, it's the quintessential idiosyncratic nature of Dublin, that we want to at least pay homage to. I think we need to not forget about that, about what makes Dublin historic. What is that actual characters that we are trying to create that continuity and the compatibility that we talk about in the code all the time. So go to the next one. So again, this side of Bridge Street on the north side, there's a lot of farmland historically. So this is one of these livery barn structure that is probably a heavy timber frame structure inside. On the outside, you can see this vertical board and batten cladding, of the building. But again, very simple, very vernacular in nature. Next one. So the design guideline has two major components when it comes to buildings. One is preservation and addition. Okay, so what we just heard the case before, and the other part of it is new construction. Okay, so obviously preservation, addition, we need to really pay attention to what is there, how do we add to it, how do we actually make sure that it's compatible and everything. Now, new construction, on the other hand, is a slightly different consideration. So this is the actual code in Chapter 5, 5.1 A and B. Talks about new construction should not be a replica of historic building, but also should not be taken to the extreme of modern architecture. New buildings should be obviously new to the observer, but there should be continuity and compatibility with the surrounding historic structure. And what does that mean? It means that they should share the underlying principles of design, form, mass, height, scale, and lot coverage as prevailed on adjacent lots. And that is what we are trying to do. We are not trying to say, oh, there's only one style or there's only one way to do it. Is that we find a way to do that we feel very strongly that it addresses the history of the site, we address the history of the previous owner of the site, that the street was named after Wing Hill Lane. And at the same time, it's obviously new, but it does have a sense of continuity and compatibility with a very strange kind of neighbors, if you will. We do have a modern, one story next to us on the north side. That office is modern, and then we have a one story on the other side that's built in the 70s. But that's what we're trying to do. So if you go to the next one, so this is what we propose, right? So first of all, I don't think we can argue that this is the extreme of modern. We want to say that this is quite respectful, quite fitting, and quite compatible with the characteristic that we talk about. The windows on the side, we talk about that, many times, and I'm sure that you heard me say that. We start with the vernacular. We think about what is the oldest vernacular that we can think about is timber frame or half timber in Europe. But also some of those are interpreted, in a stone and masonry kind of expression. And that's what, you see there. Just real quick talk about, the window. I don't want to spend too much time to respond to the staff suggestions so much, but one of the things that I think we maybe talked about last time also is that the window on the south side and the north side in this building is very difficult. I mean, first of all, this project is super technically very complicated, very difficult. And, we have our engineer and our landscape architects to try to figure all these things out and good job. But from a window standpoint, we also have a technical challenge here from the get-go is because of how tight the building is. We have literally 20 feet right away on Wing Hill Lane, okay? So in the building code, you can take half of that right away to be your separation distance from opening limitation. So that has something to do with how big your window can go. And so on the south side, we have exactly 15% opening of the window, and we are about 0.2% below that limit of that window. So that's what the window is sized that way. Now, and you ask, well, why is it 4 windows there, right? On the south side. So the reason is because the building is about 50 feet wide, long this way, give or take. And with the brick and the wall on the inside, you have about 48, feet, give or take. Now, the upstairs is going to be private offices. Okay, so private offices. How do you divide up the private offices? Well, we've done a lot of offices, so we figured that 12 feet is a good dimension, for offices. So naturally, you have 4. You can have 4 rooms up there on that side. So that's why you have 4 windows, basically, right? So that's how the rhythm kind of start to create, and then and all those things kind of follow with that logic. On the other side, on the north side, we go to the next one, Sarah. So on the other side, those windows are a lot smaller. Like if you remember seeing that comparison, and because this side we even have less space to work with, they only can have 10% of the opening for that side. And in order to bring lights into that, that's how big that window is. Now the staff show a window patterns that is twice as big as what we're showing, which again cannot pass code. It just doesn't work. So that's another reason that we do it there. And again, you look at our next door neighbor. I mean, even though this is a rendering, but they have a mid-century modern dentist, and then in the front they have these piers with the urns details to it, which I think is quite interesting. Okay, anyway, let's keep going. I'm almost done. Sorry about the time. So then, going down to the list, the other things that we kind of talk about and we argue about is the window trim detail, right? That's that one condition that was from 3 months ago. And so let's look at what actually says on the code. It says architectural elements such as eave, window design, molding, doors around, porch, and soffit should be modern interpretation of historic detail, not replication of historic style. So what we've been talking about, those strip pilaster or the vertical detail that we talk about, it's for us, we believe is an appropriate interpretation of the timber frame structure, and it's also, has precedence throughout history of architecture as a way to create, rhythm on the building, texture, proportion, and break up that otherwise a fairly blank wall. So that is what we think. And then I want to show you a few examples, so at least have some visual for you. Again, so this is the relationship with the privy and our proposal. Even though it looks quite big, but look at how tame our design actually is compared to the privy. Let's go to the next one. So that's kind of the detail that we're talking about here. Let's go to the next one. So the pilaster strip is actually, we find these things actually from all the way from 10th century, part of the Anglo-Saxon, tradition in England. And so it's not something that we just invented, as a modern thing. It does share the underlying principle of the historic precedent. So let's go to the next one. And then talking about timber frame vernacular tradition, again, looking at this building in England, it's very interesting from 16th century. Look at all the windows, they're not really lined up like what we see when you build something new nowadays, and it kind of creates this really interesting idiosyncratic characters. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is just another example of timber frame house that is the early in the American colony, and it have that vertical expression that we try to emulate. Let's go to the next one. So in conclusion, I think what we're trying to do is to balance the vernacular and idiosyncratic characters of historic Dublin, and we believe it complies with the design guideline with a respectful massing, form, height, use of materials that is similar to the neighboring buildings, and with a subtle modern interpretation of the historic detail that pay homage to Wing's eccentric privy that is right there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any initial questions for Mr. Lai?
Not yet. Nope.
Well, a couple questions. I don't want to get into some of these points yet, but explain why the windows are so open and why you've talked about the pilasters, and we'll talk more about that in relationship to timber frame. You've talked about some of the other decisions, the percentage of openings and how it differs from one side to the other. Why did you choose windows the way you did that have no kind of trim or no break in the window or?
Right. So that's a good question. So we did really study and look at all kinds of windows, in the district, and we kind of started out as a kind of a storefront kind of expression in the front along the street, and if you look around, a lot of storefront has no division, in the area and on the street. So that is kind of a simple just frame essentially. Now we feel like all our vertical details and horizontal trim kind of add a lot of texture to the windows, and the window itself we feel like doesn't really need that extra layers of that. I guess for us it's like, okay, the easy way to think about a so-called historic style is, let's just put a 6/6 or 2/2 and be done with it. And the reality is that if you look at a lot of the windows in the neighborhood, they don't necessarily have all those things. Now, some of them do, there's no question about it, but it's not a given. So for me, it's more about, okay, we're trying to create something, and this is a kind of a modern interpretation of what that would be. And so that's kind of how we see it. But then I feel like we maintain the vertical proportion of a window that you would expect, in a historic proportion, compared to, again, what the staff proposed, which is like a 2-window with a transom, which you cannot find anything like that in the district, to be honest. So, we feel like, that it is a preference, but at the same time, it's not outside the guideline, in my opinion.
Okay. Have we had any public comment?
We have not.
Is there anyone, we're going to have a lot more deliberation here, but I want to see, is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this application? Okay. We could, I think there'll be a lot of conversation, particularly when we get to the third motion, coming back to the appearance of the building. Do we want to discuss the first two? Get those out of the way, or do you want?
I have a lot of more comments on the other one, but that we can do the other two first, and then we can come back and. For me, if it's
Okay. Because I think there's going to be a lot less conversation about those. All right, so the first motion is to approve the parking plan. Does anybody have, the staff brought up the issue with the grading.
That's what I was just going to ask about.
The grading will be addressed, I think, in a condition later in the,
We don't need to make it a condition of the approval of the plan itself?
No, because the parking plan itself has to do with allowing off-site parking,
Oh.
not with how sort of the on-site works. There's sort of two different issues. One is the conceptual parking, and then the condition of approval relative to the grades is specific.
I understand.
okay. So is there a motion to approve that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion. We approve the waiver for the external outside parking plan. Is that what you want to call it? Or
Yeah, it's a parking plan.
okay.
Yes.
All right,
I'll second.
Sean, okay.
Ms. Damisar,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the waiver? The waiver is, we are eliminating the requirement, or a waiver from the requirement to have street trees on the side street.
Okay, so moved.
I'll second.
Lori?
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damisar.
Yes.
Okay, now, the most complex part. The staff report, and I think the staff's sketch could be viewed as it's something that's seen as, from the staff's point of view, is an acceptable response to our standards. I think the staff report says the houses in the back, the two buildings in the back, are generally fine. Is everybody okay?
I have an issue.
Okay, so we're all okay with the houses in the back. Okay, so let's go through, and this is really about item 3, but I think that's the big one.
And can I make a comment too? Are these are the only 6 that we have, or is there more?
We have just 6 conditions to propose tonight.
So I didn't think the trash issue was resolved, and I'm not sure I see that in this.
And that's certainly something that we can talk about and have some dialogue about, absolutely.
When you say, because it's in, the solution is in the overall plan, and it's my understanding that their enclosures, they've allocated the enclosure, they've talked to Rumpke,
But I have comment to that plan.
Go ahead.
So, because I know there was a lot of discussion, and I wasn't here on the last situation too. And I know there was a comment to put those trash containers there on the north side with the door, and that they would take those out to the street, not knowing how many containers that was, because there was assumed no parking access to put a dumpster down where it currently exists. So it's a change from where the current condition is, and we're changing that condition to move the trash up to the street. And I know that when Mr. Lombardi was here, he was going to follow up with North High Brewing to see how they're handling their trash, and he thought they were using containers. And, you know, I talked to North High Brewing. They're not doing that. They're sharing a dumpster with Cohatch down off Blacksmith. just because of the volume trash. Trash comes on Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. That's a lot of volume, a lot of traffic for those containers to go out there 4 days a week. Sarah, I don't know if you could show them that one picture. So this, when I was walking after 2 o'clock in the afternoon on High Street, this is what was right there at that one property that you just showed us earlier on your design thing. I don't think that's the best solution, especially when you got restaurant trash, which is messy, sloppy. And one of the tenants in that current building that says that even when they come to dump the dumpster, they drop trash on the ground. It's a mess. So if you're going to have trash, and there's no way to get those containers out to High Street without using the property next door. I mean, there's a small corridor, but then there's parking spots. So the trash cans are literally going to have to sit on the sidewalk. And if we're talking 5 or 6 containers, I just don't think that's the best solution.
Sir, would you mind putting the site plan up?
And again, I wasn't here for the last discussion. So if you see here, the majority of that drive belongs to 40 North High Street. And then if you go straight out, there is now a proposed, where's the handicap spot going to be now?
10 to the left and middle.
Just left of that. So you can't put the trash in a parking area on the street. Those 6 or 7 large containers are going to have to be brought out to onto the sidewalk because they can't block the drive of 40 North High Street because he's got businesses going on there. Now I know talking to I think it's a dentist office. They have containers, they have 1 or 2 containers in the back, but their drive comes around, so I'm not sure for Rumpke's. But I'm still not comfortable with this trash solution. I just think we're asking, especially when you're talking about restaurant trash, that can be messy and spill. I'd like to have further discussion on that proposal.
Mr. Lombardi, I see you shaking your head. Have you done a little more research? You want to come up and talk about this?
Confirm what you said, Mr. Joel. My neighbor at 40, okay. his
Excuse me,
track-
Bob. I'm so sorry. Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Bob Lombardi, 4912 Passaro Way, Dublin. But as I was saying, I did talk to North High Brewing, and I did find out that they take their trash containers down behind, which would be to the
Yeah, they share that. Blocked in
east,
with Cohatch. It's
behind
open.
Cohatch.
Yes.
Yeah. And they all do it together there, I guess.
Right.
So the containers that are in our trash enclosure are directly across from 40 North High Street. So the Rumpke truck can easily pull in when he's, picking up their trash or, it's not that should not be an issue as far as
And like I say, my assumption was that the fact that they were going to come out to the street, if Rumpke's going to pull down through that gravel drive and pick up with 40 North High Street, I mean, that would resolve the problem. I didn't know that discussion because I thought they were going to be pulled out to the street.
Well, they can be pulled out to the street. I didn't ask specifically if they would drive back, but I mean,
I'm just thinking the volume of containers, what goes in those containers, especially with a restaurant, and now it's going to increase usage that you haven't experienced yet because you've got, art galleries and stuff in there now.
Right.
But if you're talking like North High said, they've got 4 stops a week. And then I'm concerned, like I just saw this property owner left it out there after 2 o'clock, and who knows if they even picked it up. I just don't think it's a good presentation for what we're now trying to build a pretty property and make a pretty property, but then we're going to put rubbish out on the street. I just don't think, and the traffic right now on North High is horrendous. I mean, you got UPS, FedEx, you got delivery trucks delivering product, and you're going to have that same situation now because the restaurant's going to, where are they going to accept their deliveries? Are they going to accept those deliveries off the street? Because there's no other place for them to drop off all their restaurant materials and all that stuff. So that's just going to increase that concern. So I just feel that, when I don't see it, I still think it's a big issue because when we're trying to talk about beautifying North High Street, make it look pretty, but then we're going to put trash dumpsters out or trash cans out there. I'm just not for it.
Scheduling can solve some of that problem too. Do you know what time they come to pick up the trash?
Yeah, I haven't
They
looked
don't.
into those
Yeah,
details.
nobody can
Currently,
answer
we're
that.
getting it done out back with a bin, so I'm not certain of that.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed they were going to go
No,
down.
when I
traffic, so
asked
maybe
North
we
High
need to-
Brewery,
we-
they're going
yeah,
like, it just varies, based on how their loads are and what's going on. So
No way to move
those
trash up there
containers
without
could be
driving.
out there.
Super difficult.
Yeah, with the grade change.
I thought they were going to go back there, so maybe maybe we just need to investigate a little deeper, because I kind of thought the trash truck would go back there somehow. It's a narrow, right? But
Well, I don't have a
I
major
agree with
issue.
Mike, I think we have to make sure that, we don't have, I don't know, for
So
6 or 8 trash
how would
cans
you
out
recommend that be resolved?
there.
Right, because they're here on final now, so we can't go do more research.
Yep, okay.
It's already approved. Wasn't this already approved with the condition that we confirmed that
Yep.
we could have the trash picked up? I mean, I thought it was already approved.
I don't think it was. When I read the notes, it wasn't. It was in that meeting on the, because Martha had discussions about that too, and I think it's in the condition, and that's why I'm surprised it's not showing up here.
So condition number 9 from the preliminary development plan read that the trash collection shall be further evaluated at the FDP regarding on-street collection and the ability to integrate with the historic wall and privy system on site.
So I think it addresses part of our concern with the appearance of that. And so it's visually integrated with the historic stone and the privy.
So now what do they do with it when they move the trash out? Yeah.
Yeah, if you knew the time, because a lot of restaurants have early morning pickups. So if you knew your trash was picked up in the morning, then the issues with traffic aren't going to be as great as they're going to be if it's picked up at 5 or midday. So
Just depends how it impacts the dentist office that has patients coming in at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right. I mean, you're going to have to move it to the street, right? I mean, I don't know how they're going to get it up there, but.
yeah,
Yeah, we're at the whim of Rumpke. It's
Yes.
not.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's the problem. Can't. I don't know what the solution is other than
Right.
to tell Rumpke they have to show up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're not going to do that.
And that's not going to happen. So
Because there's nowhere else. What they've done, I think, has beautified it by putting it behind a matching area and where it is. We can't control what Rumpke does, and there's no way they can't bring it down to Blacksmith Lane. I assume Rumpke doesn't go down there. So
I'm just going on record. I don't think it's the right solution.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Period.
Well,
I
if you want
don't-
to use that as
And-
your grounds for voting down the project, that seems like pretty steep ground. I kind of like it there because you have the option. If you can get him to come in the driveway, you can keep it right there. Technically, his driveway is on their property.
Correct.
So, and I don't know if you have a shared, if he has an easement
Yeah,
to do
with
that.
40 on
So-
40 North High. Yeah.
So, I mean, they have the space on their property to wheel that down and potentially even leave it out if they would pull in and pick it up there. But I think Hillary's right.
And it may be, I don't want to also give you solutions, to leave, it may be a relationship that we have with 40 North High, just because they've got several containers, maybe a small dumpster could be put on that back section. But
We've already discussed that. On his
Okay.
property, that's not going to work.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
the North High folks are really challenging for them to take the trash all the way down to Blacksmith right now. I mean, it's a long walk down, especially if you can imagine the winter and the snow. They have to walk all the way around on the street to go down to that dumpster.
Yeah, and I'm surprised they're doing that if you're saying Rumpke can pick that up out front, so.
Yeah, I think from a common sense standpoint, that bakery tenant isn't gonna want, trash cans out front there by their business.
No,
I
they're
just
not.
don't think they're gonna stay there very long. I
No.
don't think that's gonna happen.
Right.
I mean, if you're running a
someone has to
bakery
take
and
it
you have
back.
6 of these containers in front of your bakery, I think, that's gonna cause customers not to, detract from the business. So I think from a common sense standpoint, it's, we'll be able to take care of the trash.
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about the appearance of the building. And that's, I think, the big issue. And that's that item 3 that's on that list. Who wants to start?
So I guess first thing for me, thank the presentation for me, very clear. I appreciate that. But I do, for me, a couple of, I think when you were here last time, I think we put in the condition, we're trying to find a way to find a solution to the windows and the vertical elements. And to be quite honest, you didn't bring us anything that showed something that was kind of a moving toward trying to soften the vertical, which for me was really was on the massing, right? We said, or at least for me, those vertical elements on the north side increased the massing, and I think we had some concerns that the massing was too much. So I think we were trying to find some compromises around how did we look at that in a softer way. And again, as you talked about, certainly in the guideline, we talk about how the building fits into the surrounding, let's say the surrounding area. And certainly, how you put all those in there, but certainly it says new construction should be similar in a certain sense. So I think having some eclectic or different elements in there, I would say could be certainly appropriate. But I also think there's something that needs to tie into what the other buildings are, some symmetry, a few other things we talked about inside of what the windows could look like. Because it feels like it doesn't, if I look at that, it doesn't connect to what the other things are. And certainly the vertical elements for me continue to make the thing massing bigger on your smaller buildings that you have to go as you go to the south. So for me, it was hard to find a way to think, okay, how does it tie into somewhere else? Because I think we tried to think about how the last time, where there's a compromise to try to tie the new building into what sits there. And granted, as you say, on the other side of the street, these are new buildings and more or less, but they're there, right? And certainly your building is fitting into something, okay, your second kind of as you come along, the guideline is asking to somehow fit into some of these areas. And for me, I had a hard time finding out how you were trying to make the building take some elements and move them to how they were going to fit into the rest of the, let's say, into the rest of the district as you move from, let's say, south to north. So those were, for me, I was expecting it to find some way to say, okay, I see you want it to look in a certain pattern. And I think what you explained here, I see some of your reasoning, but then I don't see the way you tried to bridge what the other parts of the district look like and how you were trying to tie this building, which is going to be an important spot, is an important spot sitting in the middle of High Street. And then trying to see how in this new construction in the guidelines, how you're trying to fit it into what exists. As you're saying, they're newer and they're a different thing, but they're there. We're trying to make sure that there's some continuity through there. So for me, I have to admit, when I looked at that, I was like a little bit taken aback that there wasn't an effort to try to find a way that where it could fit into the context of the other buildings that were sitting there. So that, for me, was when I just as a starting spot, that's what I saw when I first looked at it. And for me, what we talked about 2 or 3 months ago about trying to soften that look and try to see how you fit it more contextually in what's there existing. So that's my first impression on what I saw in the drawing. Okay, other details we can come to later, but certainly from the first one on the, let's say, the vertical elements in the windows.
Michael, Hillary, you have any feelings?
Yeah, I think more of just missing the buttons and not seeing that break in the window as much as you showed us some other, and great presentation as well on all the other pictures and the architecture that's done there, but to high majority of those, had window breaks, or they were at least 1/1 or 2/2, but you definitely saw some muttons and breaks in there. So that's kind of what I was expecting to see when you came back with it. So I think that's the biggest one. And then some of the cladding.
The challenge for me, and having spent a lot of years studying and a lot of years teaching architecture, I know anytime you make a reference, somebody can see that reference a different way. And we can talk more about the timber frame and the appropriateness of actually doing timber frame in a masonry facade. But I don't want to get into something that's more pedantic. But what I do want to say is our guidelines deal with, and I think this is what everyone's reacting to, our guidelines deal with more literal relationships to what we can, even to vernacular structures, and more common relationships that you see in the district. And I think the reaction is, and while you're making connections, but they're more oblique, because in your written description that I read, you reference the timber frame of barns, but that's always on the inside of the structure, and it's not on the outside. So it's hard for the association that our guidelines expect. It's hard for that association to be seen because it's not used. I appreciate, because your architecture, which I think is extremely valuable, is about communicating ideas, and I applaud that, and I think that's really valuable. And when we were talking before, I was hoping you could kind of find a middle ground to bridge what you want to do, but something that has closer literal, and I wouldn't want to see like 4/4 windows or things like that in the structure, but some way of having more closer literal associations with the buildings in the district. And I think that's what I react to. And I think that's the issue with that's what our guidelines are really written about, is literal connections to what people see and what they associate in the district.
Well,
I like your building in many ways better than the sketch that was presented. However, the sketch makes some relationships, whether the windows are appropriate, but it makes some relationships to things that are going on in the district that are a little bit easier to see, and I think for people to make a connection with. So
I guess Gary said it more eloquently than I did, but that's a bit here. I think your building, I think, as you say, is quite interesting. But for me, I read the guidelines somehow in a more, as you say, a more literal sense. There's some connection because the other buildings were approved in a certain way, and the connection flows in a certain way. And somehow having one that I would say would look, for me, if I'm looking at the sketch, would look quite a bit or remarkably different than the rest of them, gives me some concern.
now, Sean, I understand what you're saying. You're basically saying that the building seems too tall compared to what's next to it.
So that's one element. So the vertical elements for me, because I think that's what I said one time, those vertical elements raise your eye to make it look taller, and as it's closer to the street. So that's one, for me, that's one spot. And then as we talk about the other elements, the connection to the other buildings, windows being one thing, the vertical, you don't see that so much on the other buildings either, but the connection between the windows and the look and the connection and the context that has the rest of the rest of the streetscape is missing for me. Yeah.
So, I mean, just want to point out something. Our building is about 23 feet tall, and if you remember last, October when it has a big gable. Remember, we have a big gable that we first presented a year ago, and it was too tall at that time. And we addressed that to create a mansard roof that flattened that roof line. And quite honestly, we are quite a bit shorter than the building across the street, like the one that we just talked about, right? That was completed in 2009. I mean, those have a gable on top of the second floor with dormers. It's right across from us. So for me, I don't think it's fair to say that our building feels too tall on that street where you have this big, massive, complex across from us that is easily 10 feet taller than us. And they're sitting on another 5 feet of plinth, right? That you need to go up a set of stairs to go up to their patio. So, for me, I don't think it's fair. I mean, the other part of that is that the vertical is one thing, but if you really look into the detail, we also have a lot of horizontal lines on that facade, right? Our brick is also horizontal. We change our wood siding to horizontal from vertical also, right? That's trying to balance. For me, it's all about balance. It's that, you have vertical, but the vertical, we are not doing it in Tudor style, right? Tudor style, you have a really dark frame and then beige stucco wall. Our composition is we try to make it softer by bringing those material and coloration very close, right? So that's why the vertical element has the same finish as the rest of the building. Same thing with the stone trim is a limestone, but then it's a really white beige limestone brick that is horizontal. Again, have all this horizontal line on the brick detail. So, I mean, for me, I don't want to say that this is a little kind of exaggerated feeling about seeing those things because we've been talking about it and in our head that's what we're thinking about. But if you actually look at the elevation, I think there's more horizontal than you notice. But again, that's just my interpretation.
I think I was one of the advocates for you doing the 2 stories there, and there were other people on board who didn't. And
I appreciate that.
I don't have a problem personally with the height, but I do think the staff's comment about the height is emphasized by the vertical elements because they're primary over your horizontal surfaces behind. So I do think the comment is fair that the height is emphasized with those. I've always felt the building should be 2 stories, but I do think they're right in that trim does tend to emphasize that. And they're horizontals, but it seems to me since the verticals are imposed on the horizontal surfaces, that those are the things you read primarily as your eye moves around the building, as you read those vertical striations. And I was looking for other things that one could do, other things that one could allude to. I was looking at, some of the buildings in Old Dublin, like some of the other buildings in Dublin that had, we have frequently panels in masonry that you see in some of the churches. And so you had pilasters that were the result of panels of just not having a window in it, just a panel in there. And so, but they were, there was a regular rhythm and they kind of organized the building. So I think there are ways to make connections and still be somewhat abstract. The office building, maybe I'm the only one. Sean, were you on the board when we approved? There's a very small office building that's behind one of the structures on South High Street.
I'm familiar with that.
And the degree of abstraction is different than what you're trying to do. But you'll see the windows, they did break the windows up, but it's not a traditional way of patterning the windows. And there's a large scale window that occurs someplace else. And they made some connections to the barn that's south of the historic district. Here again, it may be more literal than what you want to do. There's a degree of abstraction though in that, and it's just I think there are ways to get it closer myself that I would personally feel more comfortable with. I think you could still have some abstraction, some be more of a modern building, but I think make more connections to the setting. But that's just me.
So let me ask you a question. So we have 2 buildings on our site, on our proposal. So you're saying that those same elements that we express in the townhouse units, those are okay?
That's the way the staff report is written.
And for me,
I understand that, and I disagree with that.
Yeah, but for me, it's in a different spot in the city, right? It's behind and it's off of, let's say, an important street in the city. So I think staff said that there's some more interpretive design for me is more appropriate. And you can go back and look through, what it would be. Is that perfect design? I mean, okay, you can have a debate about which way it would go, but certainly it's more, for me, having it less connected is appropriate.
I think I know where you're going, potentially, because the similarities between the two buildings and why would we be willing to approve it on one and not the other? And I think Sean in the staff report references that there's a little more flexibility being provided because of the location, size.
Co-hatching.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring
Yeah.
up because
I
of
mean-
that migration down in with co-hatching.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that in different spot, in different corner, there's different standards being applied. Basically, that's what you're saying. And I mean, my problem with that is that if that's the case, right? If that's the case, you say, okay, if you're on High Street, you are subject to a certain standard that may not apply in another spot. Should that be more explicit in the design guideline? Because it's not, right? I mean, the guidelines simply say that the new building should be obviously new, but should have continuity and compatibility with surrounding historic structures. It didn't say that depends on where you are, right? And again, you know,
It
and
does,
it also didn't say.
it does say
what's adjacent to that. And
Yes, it
you
does.
even made,
Yeah.
you even put it on the screen.
Yeah.
They should share the underlying principles of design, form, massing, light, scale, and lot coverage as prevails on adjacent lots. So the connection to the cohatch is pretty obvious right there. It's not so obvious now. If you're in your parking lot, you could say, well, the back of my building is close to cohatch, but it's not so obvious when you're out on the street because your building, and I'm not saying your building should look like 40, what used to be the Brazen Head, but I mean, we could make that argument that the code says right here, yeah, you can do that because it's like cohatch. This should be more like Brazen Head.
Okay, yeah. So how do we?
Textually I mean, there's things that are already there. Cohatch is there, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, we are in a very weird spot if you can appreciate, right? Like meaning that our building is built in the 60s. That is probably built at the same time as our building across the Rain Hill Lane, south of us. On the north side, we have a modern building, literally, that has a big glass, storefront on one end and a strip window on the other side, and then small little window along along the side. Is that what we should treat that building to have a so-called literal connection to that north side building? If that's what you suggest, I just don't think that's appropriate, right? I mean, if you look at the image, if you can put back the image on, that view.
We can only react to what you present to us. And I think we've found designing the buildings for our applicants is not a good idea because we'll make suggestions. They rarely come back with the suggestions we make, which is fine. And you're design professionals. You should. But we're not going to design it. And we react to what's brought to us. And I think the staff was trying to, things didn't change. So they're trying to say, well, here's something that could meet the guidelines because nothing changed. So, and that's why the
Are we just
recommendation-
quibbling over the vertical?
I think we're talking about the whole.
I think we're talking
Yeah.
about window. I think there's. more.
I agree. And
Right.
I think what I'm looking for is a justification for why they should stay. I'm not hearing it.
Why the justification why they should stay?
Why should the vertical elements stay? Let's just stick with that for now, and then we'll talk about the windows.
Okay. So if you ask me, and I think we maybe talked about that before when we first presented things last time. For us, it's important to have rhythms on the facade And it's important to have something that we can regularize, the facade. And so those polyester is really trying to do that, just like a lot of historic building is trying to do, to kind of create a rhythm and a regular grid, for the building, and that apply to. It becomes a logic. It becomes a motif, if you will, that apply to the whole block. That basically say this is built at one time, right? And with those within those, it set up a framework that we apply. We add the opening, the windows, to it. And the window obviously has to have different sizes because of functionality, reason. Like in the first floor, for example, we talk about that, towards the east side, it's going to be the back kitchen and back of the house. It makes no sense to put a big window there. It makes no sense that all the windows are the same size, right? So, so it kind of created a regulated composition and proportion that allow variation within that. So that's the first thing that we said, this is a useful and a practical solution to create that. And on top of that, we think that it's really add a lot of texture to the facade, that it really enhanced, for me, it really enhanced the appearance of that. And I think that's important. I think my critique of what's existing over there, if you look across the street from us, is a painted concrete block with a tiny little windows. You can't say that is something that we need to have a literal connection to. I don't think you can make that argument. And you look on the other side, they have the same thing. They have a painted, some kind of concrete block with small windows that is high up and blank wall all the way at the bottom. I don't think this is the literal connection that you can argue that we should try to tie to. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're trying to create something that we feel like it fits in a bigger context of the idiosyncratic characters of the historic Dublin.
And I think that's.
And at the same time, create a piece of architecture that is attractive.
We want it to fit into the greater context like you do. But I think that's the challenge for us, really seeing literally how it fits, because a traditional building would use window relationships, same size window, same rhythm, as a way to accomplish. I like what you're doing. You have multiple ordering systems on the facades, and I think that's really nice, but that's not in our code, and we're looking for clear literal associations with something more common in the district. And I think that's what we all struggle with.
Right.
And the staff as well. I think everybody who's looked at this, the consultants, when they've looked at it, it's been and we tried to, in a nice way, warn you when you came to the earlier presentation, this is a little abstract. Can you at least do something with the windows? But, here we are again. And so I'm not sure, I don't think there's any support up here.
I mean, for me, reading what we have here and trying to interpret what was done in the recent past or here, it's hard for me to see where it's connecting and what we're kind of tasked to make sure that happens, especially in that spot though.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think I hear that what you're saying, that I think you don't feel comfortable, right, with what is being presented.
We don't think it meets the guidelines. Make it.
And you don't. Now, here's what I have a problem. I don't have a problem. You say that you don't feel comfortable with what is presented. What I disagree is you said it doesn't comply with the guideline. The guideline really did not say that. The guideline did not say that the window pattern has to be historic. It actually says something completely different, right? It says that it should be a modern interpretation, not a replication.
It says things should be similar to what's in the district.
Yes.
And that's the question. Where's the similarity?
Right. I agree with you. I mean, I think that's the interpretation disconnect, right? In my mind is that, what does that mean, right? How much creativities should we allow within that modern interpretation of these elements. Because again, think about it. We are building on the site of that historic privy that breaks all the rules. If you think about it. So what I'm trying to say is that if you say that no, we should not be allowed to break any rules. We should not be allowed to deviate from the idealized, prescriptive, imaginary, traditional style. We are not allowed to look at those quirkiness of the building that was actually here before all these things, right? I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
That's
but
not what we're saying. Yeah.
you've looked at it in a way, it's fine, you can look at those things. Maybe the continuity you create is the material, like you did around the trash containers. You used a stone that's similar to stone being used elsewhere, but at least that form, everybody understands that as a simple wall. So, we have problems with the way you have interpreted the code and what you have presented. And unfortunately, I guess in this case, we're the ones who have to make that call, and the staff, along with the staff. So.
Right.
Okay, well, I mean, I appreciate that, but I want to figure out a way to move forward, because to be honest, I don't feel like we have a very clear direction when we were here last time. I'm just saying, maybe I just wasn't listening, close enough. But I do understand that, right? I do understand where you guys stand. I hear what you have to say, and I would say that let's figure a way to see what exactly is the things that we can overlap. Like, meaning that let's say if you look at our design, like you said, you can only comment on what you see, what is being proposed. So let's say the vertical elements is off the table. Let's say for Sean, okay. So just now we have to do a little bit of merger. I'm not saying that we can get these things done, but I just want to at least understand where we stand. So at least, we have something to work towards, right? Right? So let's just imagine that the vertical element is not there anymore. So you have brick building, you have a bunch of windows, right? On that side, on that south side. Okay, we have a seal, we have a header, we have a window.
I don't think we can design the whole building tonight. And I
No,
think,
and the staff have given you
and
suggestions.
you had that opportunity to come back to us. Or you could have brought options like the individual for the conceptual review has done in other settings. Bring us options and saying, would you be more likely to approve this than that? The staff, if you want us to approve something tonight, that could be approved. I think somebody could do something else with that, but everything's written. So if you want us to approve something, we can approve that design.
So you're telling me you can approve that staff design even though it doesn't comply with building code, or it has to have some kind of
No,
modification?
it's got to, I mean, I understand because it's a fire rating issue on the one side that he's pointing out. And so that's what you're talking about, the fire rating issue on the north side and why you can't. Yeah, I mean, that, I think that we'd have to say it's subject to an adjustment for the building code.
Okay.
And then.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so, our owner, Bob, want to say something.
Yeah, my name is Eliza Ho, 2576 Summer Street. If you will allow me to say a few words, my husband and I co-designed this, building. I think, one of the things that I do want to share with the board and, from a designer standpoint is I don't think we have clear instruction from the PDP's comment, from the board, that, there's only one comment on the condition saying that we need to relook at the window trims or the door, arrangement. There is not a specific, specifically saying that the vertical element needs to be gone, the window needs to be regularized. So I think that leads us to think that, that the code, whether it is clear or not, or, we can actually argue for the interpretation. I think that's the one thing that we really want to share with you. We are being led to a direction that it is not clear to us, we are led to think that it is, it can be open for interpretation. Because it looks like, there are some literal meaning, in the code. If it is not said clearly, then it seems that there's room for interpretation. If it is not the case, then I think it should be spelled out either in the board or, I believe that, Sarah has done, her work, already share with us, very literal way. But then we did not directly hear from the board. So we do not see that it is actually a viable solution. And as a designer, we are really trying to make a case and, we are representing our clients. So tonight, what I really want to achieve is we have a sense of clarity where we are going. So if you are telling us that, it needs to be a literal interpretation of how the window needs to be placed, what it should look like, then, I think we are comfortable to comply with that. But, we are not being given that clear direction to begin with.
I'll give you a
So I
couple
just want
clear
to be
points
to share.
right now. Well, that's because there are so many different ways that this building could be brought into compliance with our code. So many different ways. But I'll summarize a couple of things. I think one, you probably need to get rid of the verticals. And everybody here, you join in. I think the windows, there needs to be, where there are windows, as regular a pattern as possible. Okay? The windows are going to need to have more trim. So some sort of expression at the head, some sort of expression at the sill, possibly some sort of expression at the sides. I think those are some of the strongest elements I think that we could, and a regular pattern of openings would be great. And that would go a long way as well.
Okay, I really appreciate that, this comment, I wish, we heard that 3 months ago, then, we can, I'm sure, I don't want to waste, my client's time and, money on us. And, I clearly see that where the direction is going. And for me, I think it is fair to my client and also from us, as a designer, we want a sense of, clarity, from this discussion. And I truly appreciate that. So, regularize, window and, no vertical trims. It seems to me that, if we can, provide a design that check these boxes, it feels like I can, satisfy the board and also the staff and, my client as well. Is it a true statement?
Are there other primary issues that I should have brought up as suggestions?
There's more horizontal elements, the water table caps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Staff report quoted more horizontal elements.
Yeah,
Okay.
the bricked-in windows.
So I think those 5 elements are the ones that need to be addressed.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
They're in item 3, the removal of the vertical stone and wood elements except in the gable ends. Use of similar window arrangements. I don't think it has to be, because I don't think we're going to vote on this as presented herein by staff, but I think use of similar window arrangements is really the goal.
Okay.
Addition of horizontal elements, including trim bands on the north portion of the building, water table caps on all locations. Maintain a distance between the water table and the northwest window on the north elevation. I personally, number 5, I think that number 5 is looking for some way of breaking up that wall. It says 2 recessed bricked-in windows added to the rear stone elevation with lintels and sills. I think the goal is to break the wall up.
Yeah, I was going to say,
And I
I'm
think
not
that's-
too,
Yeah, I think that's where
wedded
you
to
talk about
bricked-in
the kitchen
windows.
was
I
going to
don't
be,
like
or the, where that's going to be functional use and not to have a window view. I think that's what was.
Before, it sounds like it's best for you to table this. But before if we are going to head in that direction, we should go through the other 5 conditions. They won't take as long to make sure that you understand those and no changes need to be made to those.
If the board will allow me, I believe, Bob, you want to say a few things. Yeah, if you want to say a few things, I think you're entitled to.
I'm just the owner here.
Yeah, but
I'm okay with what the staff has recommended and the ARB. What I want to know as the owner is this process has taken a long time. I want to get the job done. You guys tell us, Tim Lai, or, my architect here, what we need to do so that the next time we come back, we can get this FDP plan. I don't want to waste time.
Ken,
So that's why I just need to have a clear understanding. I'm okay with what you guys have recommended.
we just gave a list of items that'll be in the minutes that need to be addressed. I don't know if because of the time it takes staff to put reports together and get ready for the agenda, I don't know if there's opportunity to even have a work session. If you would want to have some kind of informal work session with the board where we review options, is that possible?
With the board as a
Well-
formal group.
I'm just trying to find a way for them to
Yeah.
get some
Well-
feedback as early as possible.
We have, because of the holidays, we have 4 weeks between tonight and our next meeting. It'd be a pretty quick turnaround.
For everybody.
For everyone.
Including the applicants.
Yes, yes.
All right. When you have your internal meeting,
I mean, you can vote. I mean. if they
Right,
say it's
that
good
we
for
can
them,
get, if you're good with
this,
these,
you vote
then you
this.
can vote on this.
Because we could clear these off and then just have 3 as the pending.
Yeah, we just have to think about what that.
Yeah.
Sure that's correct, huh?
That's correct.
Booked and window. Okay, what are
we, I think it's too open. I think
No.
it's too open-ended I think we need to
Think-
see. I think we
Okay.
need to see it. I really do. I think we need to see it. I think there's already been discussions, there's not enough communication. And if we don't see it and just put something open-ended here,
we're gonna have the same problem. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
we're just asking for trouble. Okay. So we've made it clear what we're recommending. There's still a lot of flexibility in what we've recommended. So that's why I was looking for a way for you to test some of these ideas. And maybe can it be done in your you have a meeting with them when they submit things?
We can have a meeting with the applicant team anytime that they wish.
I think that would be a
That-
really good idea.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because we can get staff to,
Sorry, can you clarify that? So you're saying that you're suggesting us to meet with the staff again to propose a revision of the design after tonight?
No, well,
No.
when you come back with a revision, if you want some feedback, before it comes to us, I'm just trying to.
Right.
yeah.
So we need to come back for the design, you're saying? Is that what you're suggesting? We can't get a condition here because you feel like it's too
But we're
open-ended?
not gonna,
Yeah.
we're not, no, we need to see it here.
You need to see that again,
We need to
just
see
for
the
that
design here.
number 3 condition.
Let's look at
Well, let's go through the others. Okay, number 1, prior to obtaining a demolition permit for the existing buildings, the applicant shall obtain approval from the ARB for reconstruction of the shared stone. Oh, they're up there, so I don't need to read them. You okay with that one?
We're okay with that,
Okay.
yeah.
And you're okay with 2? Okay. And you're okay with 4?
Yes.
Okay, and are you okay with 5 and 6?
Yes.
How do we give a partial approval for this final development plan?
Yeah, I don't know that we,
These are requiring no additional work on your part. And so I think I think we should just table this. And then we
Leave them
just
on there.
keep those apart because these others are not slowing you down. What's
Right.
slowing you down is the appearance of the structure.
That's right. And there might even be an opportunity, for example, to address number 4 with the photometric plan while these other things are being taken care of. And then we come back with a final development plan that is complete, and you all can see it in its totality and evaluate it comprehensively.
Yeah, that
Right.
makes sense.
And we'll have a whole lot less, to use a Yiddish word, tsuris, if staff already agrees to the proposal.
Yeah.
Depends on when we can get together to meet and when we have revised plans. We have a very, very short turnaround time for December, and we're not promising hearing dates these days. We just aren't. That's the reality of it. Bob, we can't catch that on
Come up
the
there.
tape, please. I'm sorry, and thank you.
Sarah, I think our team can get those revised plans to you and drawings in a timely manner, correct?
Yes.
Right. So we can move this along.
Yeah, Sarah, can you
But,
give
I
us
mean,
a specific
This has
day?
gone on
What's
for
the,
almost 2 years for me.
yeah, I want to know a specific day, for our submission and then your hearing day, and then we can, we can see whether it's possible for us to do that.
Technically, the submittal date and actually the completeness date for the December hearing was 2 weeks ago.
It was 2 weeks ago. So the
we
case
are-
would not be heard until
We
January.
are already behind the 8 ball on that, and I'm that's just the honest
Yeah.
situation.
I almost want to make a proposal here, because our case actually was supposed to be heard 1 month ago. And there's staff delay, that we did not get our engineering comments on time, that we are not being able to present the case. So, my client basically suffered, another month of loss of time. And now, because of the holiday, and, I'm not trying to blame anyone. I understand that, short staff is, very common, in the city of Columbus, or, in Dublin as well. I totally understand the situation. But I think, I hope that you can be sympathetic to our timeline. We were not given clear direction from PDP. And, we did not change our design because we took a liberal stand, in interpreting the code. And still, at the end of today's discussion, I still think that our design proposal fulfill the code, the design guideline, but it's different in interpretation. And you can say that our interpretation is not appropriate for the historic court. I can agree to your disagreement. That is, but I don't think that our proposed design, it is not compliant to code if the code is allowed for interpretation. So I think that is, and I simply hope that, you can be sympathetic to our timeline. We were being delayed for 2 months, and there's also the historic wall, which is on 40 North High Street, that, again, it is because of, short staff, in the city, that our case cannot be heard tonight.
No,
So-
it's not. You did not make any changes to the design.
We did.
And we have not had the individual who's here on the first case, he had no problems interpreting what the board told him and came back with adjustments. So maybe, we're going to have to disagree here on this, because you had an opportunity to come back earlier and to make changes. And if this had been revised, so that fault does not lie here. Maybe we all share some, but that is not the fault of the staff. So
I'm not trying to lay blame, but, simply, objectively, it's the timeline that we were being promised to be heard, last month, the case. You can, ask Sarah, about that. We got confirmation from the staff that we will be heard on October 26th, but it did not happen because we did not receive engineering comments from the city because of the short staff. Again, I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm trying to find a solution for my client, and I truly don't want to keep delaying the situation. You know, I'm more than happy to make, you know, adjustment on the design as soon as possible. You know, I'm just hoping that, you know, cases can be heard in a timely manner, and then we got clear feedback from the board, and so we can move forward. You know, no one wants to waste time here, and I apologize for the later case tonight. You know, we have been, you know, occupying too much time. So if you can give us clear direction, which we can move together fast, then, you know, I'm more than happy to comply.
Well, I think because we have other pending cases that require staff report and now we have the holidays, it doesn't sound like any earlier than the January meeting is possible. Is that right? And I don't want to, we're not trying to impose it. I'm inferring from your earlier comment. You don't have to restate it. You're shaking your head. That's accurate. We can't do it before the January meeting.
So January is the hearing day. Is it correct, Sarah?
I'm sorry?
Can you give me a, you know, a definitive date for ARB hearing in January? And then our submission?
Yeah, I'd have to look at my schedule, but we
Okay.
can certainly talk about that tomorrow.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I don't mean to take up more of your time, and I appreciate the comments tonight. Thank you.
Okay. We want to table this, right?
Go
ahead, Bob.
Just to be clear, we'll be in front of the ARB in January.
I don't, it's not going to be
That's the
possible to come
earliest.
before
That's the earliest.
before
Okay.
December.
I guess what's most important, I guess, is that Tim and Eliza work with your staff
Yes.
and make certain that the next time we're in front of you, everybody's on the same page.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how do we make certain that happens?
You'll meet with Sarah. Correct?
Yeah.
But you're gonna have,
You'll work
but
with
we're
that.
not gonna compare schedules right now. So you guys have to do that offline. Work with Sarah. We're not gonna compare calendars right now. You work offline outside the meeting to figure out
Okay.
when you
No,
can
I
meet.
understand. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
I'm good.
So with that, okay, I move to table this action until table it, period.
Yep, I second it.
Lori, when you, did you
She's
hear?
getting
Okay.
ready.
Yes.
Mr. Cotter? Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
And Ms. Damiser?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone need a short break? Okay, I'm move away from the mic for. I'll say this publicly. Sarah, the members of the city, other offices that were here to present, they still have to sit through one more. Do they want to stay? Okay, you're shaking your head. Okay, all right. I was just going to see if you want to go next month. I'm just trying to, all right.
Thank
can
you for
see
asking.
These take a while. Okay,
Yeah, I warned them that
all right.
Hillary had to, something called her. So
Okay.
let's give it a quick break.
I'm going to wait just a minute for our board member to return. Nope, that's okay. We lost Lori, so we can't. You left, then Sean left, then Lori left. So as soon as Lori comes back, we'll get started. You sure you want to stay? Okay. Do you- All right, we're all back. Okay. All right, case 3. 114 South High Street. This is a minor project review. The application is request for deck modifications and window replacements to a building on a 0.2 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic South. The site is located approximately 85 feet southeast of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane with South High Street. Ms. Mullinex will be our presenter. And Taylor, whenever you're ready.
Thank you and good evening. This is a request for review and approval of a minor project for exterior modifications, including deck revisions and window replacements located at 114 South High. The 0.20 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and is located southeast of the intersection of Penny Hill Lane and South High Street. The property is zoned Historic District, Historic South, and is surrounded by businesses to the north, the south, and west, as well as single-family homes to the east. The existing commercial building was built in 1948 in the colonial revival style and was the office of Dr. Harry Carr. The building is recommended contributing to the Historic District as mentioned in the 2017 Historic and Cultural Assessment. Case history for the site includes several master sign plans and an administrative approval for basement work of the rear elevation. As you know, last month, the ARB approved a minor project review for exterior modifications. At that time, the applicant was conditioned to provide additional window documentation for the proposed window replacements with their next minor project review application, which is before you this evening. And then additionally, the building permit remains open for these ongoing applications and work that is going on for the exterior modifications. So these are the existing conditions of the west and north elevations. The deck will be located along the north elevation shown here. And then just note that the ground level windows, which are proposed to be replaced. And it came to staff's attention this morning that there was an unauthorized removal of the existing landscaping at the site. Any construction activities and disturbed areas that are dormant for more than 14 days are required to provide temporary stabilization for the site. So engineering has been notified of this, and staff does not have an erosion plan from the applicant. So a condition of approval will be shared in planning's recommendation to the board for their consideration. These are the existing conditions of the east and south elevations. Again, here, note the ground level windows along both elevations, which are proposed to be replaced. The next couple of slides here are showing existing conditions and an interior perspective of the 3 ground level windows visible from South High Street. This is window number 1 along the west elevation. This is window number 2 along the west elevation as well, which you could see here is an 8/8 window. And then this is window number 11, which is along the north elevation. So the proposed exterior modifications include replacing all ground level windows. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to modify an approved 468 square foot deck to 490 square feet to accommodate an improved ramp design for ADA access. The applicant also shows the 18-inch offset of the deck from the rear elevation, which was conditioned by ARB in October. The lot coverage has slightly increased with the deck revisions, but both lot coverage and setbacks continue to be met. And here we have the west and north elevations shown with the revised deck and ramp design. Note the 18-inch offset again near the rear of the building, which now distinguishes between the historic structure and the new construction. And then just as a friendly reminder, the underdeck screening and landscaping along the rear elevation will be addressed in a future minor project review application. So windows 1, 2, and 11 on the ground level are shown and proposed to be replaced. The applicant was conditioned by the ARB to consider storm windows or to present repairs at the October meeting. And the applicant has since indicated that replacement is necessary due to the extent of the deterioration of these windows. Staff is supportive of the window replacements generally, except for these 3 windows, which are shown, as staff is concerned that replacing these windows will negatively affect the character of the building, since exact window size dimensions were not provided during plan review to staff. And so a recommended condition of approval requests that an exact window dimensions be provided to staff to just ensure that matching replacements are being made. So the east elevation shows the revised deck along the rear of the building here. Again, the ground level windows, which are numbers 3 through 10 shown here, are proposed to be replaced on the east and south elevations. It was brought to staff's attention yesterday that existing window dimensions were noted incorrectly on the plans, so those will need to be revised. And again, recommended conditions of approval are proposed for the board's consideration, which addresses staff concerns regarding the revisions on the plans, as well as noting dimensions correctly to ensure like-for-like replacements. Materials for the deck were previously approved by the ARB, and here we have the proposed window materials, which have yet to be approved. The applicant is proposing Geldwin RLast pine windows with simulated divided lights and clear glazing. The interior and exterior framing, as well as the muntins, will be primed and painted white to match the building trim color, which was previously approved by ARB. And finally, the window hardware will be white in color. The minor project review criteria is either met with conditions, or not applicable. And finally, planning recommends approval of the minor project review with conditions, including 2 new conditions which are highlighted in green for the board's consideration to finalize window dimensions on the plans, as well as erosion control for the site. Lastly, exterior has been added to condition number 2 to permit either type of storm window if that's applicable. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant's in attendance this evening. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. No.
I have one. Taylor, the only documentation that I found in my packet regarding the condition of the existing windows was essentially two paragraphs. One, and I'll talk more about, said something about, alluded to storms, storm windows, and the other was another comment that, but I did not see, I know when we were here before, we asked for a window by window
There was one.
documentation.
There was a window by
Yeah,
window.
it was included.
Is it?
It had a numerical code as to each of the conditions of the windows. I mean, each window was given 1 through 5 or 6.
Yeah, and A, B, C,
Problems.
D, E.
Yeah.
Conditions.
And it was very clear what each window
Okay,
had problems with.
okay. All right, that's, thanks.
And they were problematic.
Mr. Bauer?
Thank you, Jeff Bauer, 1956 Archer Lane, Dublin, Ohio is my home address. I really don't have anything to add, except I thank all of you, certainly a long evening, and appreciate, I know you worked with us last month. Taylor has worked incredibly hard with my partner Brandon and Moses and I to make sure we get this right. So Taylor, I truly appreciate your efforts. It's been admirable. So beyond that, I really don't have anything to add. I think we all know what the discussion is going to be. I have nothing to add except that I just want to reiterate that we did unfortunately have a wrong dimensions that were originally submitted, which was clearly just a clerical oversight. There is absolutely zero intention of expanding or contracting any of these window openings. And we 1000% agree with staff's support that we will work with them clearly to make sure that they're exactly the same dimensions. So that has never been intended. It was the window manufacturer screwed up the first time. Taylor caught it. Frankly, we got it corrected. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bauer?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
We have not received any public comment, but yeah.
No, we have not.
Okay. All right, staff comments. Hillary, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, no, I just heard staff comments. I don't know what.
Oh, I meant board comments.
Oh, no, I didn't have no comments.
No.
Okay. Okay, so so since there's no additional,
I do have one question for the applicant. Which one is it? Oh, the erosion and sedimentation control plan. Is that all right?
Again, we found out that at 4 o'clock today, which I was excited to, happy that she at least gave me the heads up, which I appreciate. We absolutely will work with engineering. We've had city inspectors out at that building almost daily since we're under building permit. The city inspector's been there. This is absolutely the first time we've heard of it, and we 1000% comply.
Great.
It was never our intention to, the word unauthorized is certainly, I guess, acceptable, but that was never, when the building got excavated to backfill it properly, unfortunately, the shoddy landscaping, we fully come back. We're going to come back with a landscaping plan. We'll take care of the erosion. That was never intended to be anything, never intended to be malicious, I guess is a word that I was looking for.
No, I'm not accusing you. I just want to make sure that.
No, I appreciate that.
that
And
you're
yes,
okay
like I
with
said,
that
Taylor, we
condition.
appreciate the email at 4 o'clock or whenever it came today. We will be on the phone with the city engineer tomorrow morning to make sure we
Great.
understand. Again, it was a little bit surprised because we've had multiple City of Dublin staff members out on our building site for the last 4 months, and that's the first time we heard of it. So we'll absolutely comply.
okay. Are you comfortable with the conditions? Have you read the conditions?
I guess I need to clarify, the 1, 2, and 11. I think that what I understand is that with the exception, I think there's obviously 11 windows that we're discussing. So 8 of them appear to be approved or, ready to be replaced like for like. I'm still a little bit confused about 1, 2, and 11 and just want to make sure that we have every intention of replacing 1, 2, and 11 with those conditions of, overall glass muntins, everything else. But yes, we agree as long as I'm clear that 1, 2, and 11 are being voted on to be replaced if they're like for like.
Yeah, I think the staff's goal is to make sure they fit. And what was a little concerning is your two-paragraph statement said, well, if they don't fit quite right, we'll shim and add trim. We don't want that add trim part in there. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent.
I understand that. And again, I appreciate the clarification, but yes, they will be like for like.
The other thing, I was surprised your window consultant, the most common application of storm windows in historic districts is on the outside. I mean, that's where you put them. You
Well,
can put them on the inside,
Again,
but that's, you may want to talk to that person.
that was the comment that our architect that does historical buildings all over the state gave me, so I didn't make that up, but I appreciate the disagreement on that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, if I just may add a little additional clarity on condition number 2 regarding windows 1, 2, and 11. So the dimensions that we're missing from the plans, specifically regarding the muntins and the overall divisions, are the existing window dimensions. So we have the proposed window muntin, dimensions, but we really need those existing muntin dimensions to be able to compare both plans and ensure that that like-for-like replacement's being made. So that's like that missing piece. And so this condition 2 is very specific to that to ensure that that replacement is done accordingly.
so you're not going to go out and field measure yourself. You want them to provide, okay.
We would defer to the applicant to do that for us, but if we have to show up on site.
Again, I think we
We
understand,
do that.
and Taylor will attest to my more than one email saying, please help me understand exactly what you're saying. She's been wonderful. I think we'll get through that together.
Okay, all right. You understand the conditions. I don't think there's any further discussion here needed. Is there a motion to approve the minor project review with the 4 conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minor project review with the following conditions.
Yes, I'll second.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Damisser,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
I want to thank the staff for the quick turnaround on this. I'm sure you
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I also want to thank you for providing exactly the information that we asked for on the windows. So, thanks.
Well, again, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. I know it's been a long night, so thank you very much, and thank you both for all your help.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that was very helpful, Mike. Thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda is a presentation by City Engineering to discuss utility relocation project on Franklin Street.
Good evening, board members. So I'm here this evening to discuss the Franklin Street Extension Project. Sarah Holt invited us. Oh, my apologies. I'm used to that already being done. My apologies. So I am Brian Gable, the Deputy Director of Engineering over Design and Construction. So I report to Paul Hammersmith, the City Engineer. So Sarah invited us to come and present the Franklin Street Extension Project located in and or adjacent to historic Dublin. So we're going to go through that this evening. So what we're going to go through agenda, we're going to talk about the project overview, the coordination that occurred with the project, aesthetics on the project, and then also the timeline for the project. So short and sweet on the project overview. Overall, and these are broad strokes, the project will perform the following. It will first and foremost perform the extension of Franklin Street from Bridge Street to North Street. So that is the aqua area there. That takes us through the school property that was deeded over in 2017. The second is that it will reconstruct Franklin Street from Bridge Street to Sells Alley, adjacent to Le Chatelaine, the restaurant there, and the Dublin Community Church. Thirdly, a traffic signal will be installed at Bridge Street and Franklin Street. This will be a four-way, obviously, with pedestrian crossings at each segment. The pedestrian signal at Bridge and Darby will be removed. That's in blue there. You can see on your screen next to the word Bridge Street. And then finally, we will bury the overhead aerial utility lines along that red alignment there. Sections of that go through the school property. So moving right on to coordination. Being in historic Dublin and the downtown area, obviously there are adjacent property owners very close to the site that we are building this roadway. So first and foremost, it required quite a bit of coordination with the Dublin City Schools. North Fork Indian Run Elementary is there. The largest thing that we are doing with the project will be realigning their bus driveway. This is a one-way in driveway that they use for loading and unloading students directly off of the curb or sidewalk that is adjacent to the roadway. The existing location will be much too close to the new intersection, and so for reduction of conflicts and other items, we shifted that to fit within Franklin Street in a more acceptable location for that drive entrance. The schools were very open to this because it also gave them additional queuing for buses for them to be able to load and unload in the morning and the afternoon. The second will be modifications to several of their pedestrian paths within the school site. Some of them are just shifted slightly. Some of them are improved to connect to the street as well. The second would be the City Darby Street parking lot, which is in the top right of your screen. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got colors here too. So there's the aqua there for the schools. I'm sorry. And so the red there is the sections of the Darby Street parking lot that will be impacted. The more rectangular or square rectangle is where quite a few underground utility items will be located. And then the more north and south rectangle is the short retaining wall. That'll also install some landscape in that area. Thirdly, we impacted the J-Lou's of Dublin building that is at 50 West Bridge Street. So their exit to Bridge Street that is immediately adjacent to the now right-of-way is too close, and actually is where the ADA ramps need to be located. So that exit was no longer viable. That's something that we've coordinated and worked quite extensively with the owner on coordinating. They will get a new entrance from the site that is right across from the school's driveway. Both of these driveways will look very similar in nature to the driveways and less like streets. So there's not going to be asphalt. There actually be brick pavers. And there'll be some examples later I can try to point out to you. There will be a little bit of a loss of parking at that site that we've coordinated with them as well, and they have some improvements that will probably be proposed to ARB in the future as well. So the Dublin Community Church is impacted. They're on the bottom left of the screen. They're mostly just temporary grading easements for us to be able to really blend in the new roadway and sidewalks. And then finally, the Old Dublin Town Center 2, which is the building that Le Chatelaine is located in. There's some minor adjustments to their sidewalk easements, and then obviously they have several encroachments into the right-of-way that were agreed by council when that building was put together. So we had to coordinate some of that encroachment and some of the improvements with that as well. So, and last but not least, of course, Dublin city events. Many parades go down Bridge Street, and several other sites are utilized, including the Darby Street parking lot. And we've kind of worked with event staff to work through a lot of those items. So thirdly, I'll move on into the project aesthetics. So first and foremost, this is where we can look at the pavers that I referenced before. So the driveways will actually look very similar to a walkaway. That gives us two advantages. One, it doesn't look like a street. It's hard to mistake it as a street. And two, it's for driver perception. When they're turning, they recognize that that is a sidewalk. It really helps reinforce that pedestrians are present. So this is the streetscape that we're building here. On the left is the proposed streetscape with a slight rendering. And then on the right is the existing streetscape just north of our proposed location here at Franklin Street between Rockcrest and North Street. So you can see the two are actually remarkably similar in layout, pattern, and overall feel. So you can see at the top there are drive entrances and what those look like. And then also the parking bays as well. So the project's going to include brick paver sidewalks, street trees, permeable paver parking bays, granite curbs, street lights, and several other aesthetic features to match. And those all match the Columbus Metropolitan Library streetscape that was built sometime in about 2016. So overall project aesthetics for landscaping, there are street trees being installed. Those are highlighted in green here. Then we have some utility screening, as I've referenced, in the Darby lot. And thirdly, we have additional landscaping for the adjacent affected properties as well. So that's Dublin City Schools, the Darby Street parking lot, and then J. Lewis of Dublin. I do want to note the utility landscaping or screening. We did model this quite a bit after the South High Street burial project you guys saw in August. So this rendering is from that, so it's not quite exactly what we'll have. The layout on the left is the actual proposed rendering, or I'm sorry, the proposed landscaping for the area. So you can see there's quite a bit of underground equipment that's going to be located at the site. We're moving several items out of various locations in the Darby lot and centralizing them here, and then also providing a more aggressive landscape in the area. Staff worked with several divisions to okay a loss of one parking space in order to provide some additional screening at this location. Yeah, so and then the landscaping you see here is a mixture of dogwoods, Anglo-Japanese yews, and featherweed grasses. And the grasses are what we need in front of AEP's doors to their equipment. They have to be able to be traversable. So those grasses, while they grow nice and tall, they still consider them traversable to be able to maneuver through them without trouble. So I'll cover the three what are technically private sites and the landscaping that we're doing with the project. So the first is the Darby Street parking lot. On the top, you can see a picture of the current condition of the location, and then the bottom is what is planned overall. This is a vertical plan view looking down at it. So you can see the street trees, but then you can also see some additional trees and shrubs and landscaping along the Darby lot in the frontage there. So right now there's some arborvitaes and general evergreens there. But then you can also see quite a few utility items all over the place there. So you see these large units here, you see a meter cabinet, all the utility poles, and then there's even more down here where the EV chargers are. So a lot of this is going to get centralized. Those units in the center of the screen nearest to that Jeep, those are all going to be removed. And then our city lighting controller is going to be relocated into that utility area. And then all of it's going to be screened. And then this whole area is going to be able to be landscaped. So this is the area that we are proposing to place a lot of that utility items. I'm working currently with the supplier for the EV chargers to reduce the size of this electric panel you see here to really bring it down and compact it quite a bit. And then also fit in all of AEP's items that need to go into that corner. And then thirdly, there's a small retaining wall that gets installed along this area. This is very short. It's about under 30 inches because we don't require fencing at the top of it. The picture at the top here is actually what's along the north side of the Darby lot already. So we are going to be matching that landscaping, that wall aesthetic and facade with it. So it'll have that textured cap and textured side as well. So, and again, this is under 30 inches, and the wall varies in height a bit from 12 all the way up to 30. So next for our private locations is J. Lewis of Dublin. So again, at the top is the existing site. You can see, what is J. Lewis site is primarily asphalt driveway. That drive is going to be removed. Some of the parking is adjusted slightly, not too much. And then we're going to have a nice area that will include some additional landscaping since it's going to be right along the new city streetscape. So, and again, this was coordinated quite extensively with J. Lewis and then also our planning division as well. So this area is going to have some snow velvet mock orange. I'm not exactly sure that. And then there's emerald green arborvitaes and then heavy metal switchgrass. I really liked that switchgrass name, by the way. So, and it's going to look pretty nice. It'll have a nice layout. Aesthetically, I think it's going to really fit in very well with our project. And then our third site improvement is for the Dublin City School site itself. They had requested some positive protection between the school site and the new roadway. We also thought that would be an appropriate gesture. So we included some black short chain link fence with some additional arborvitaes and, I'm sorry, these are juniper, compact Pfizer juniper in front of that fence. So from the roadway side, you'll probably not even notice that the fence is there. From the school side, it is the aesthetics, what they're looking for that protection, ensure that no child is able to accidentally go out into the new roadway that's there. So the schools do use the rear of the building for some outdoor activities, so it was pretty important to be able to do this. You can also see on the right here some additional improvements to their path to their site. The rear of the building really doesn't actually have an appropriate ADA compliant entrance. So with the streetscape, we were able to fit in an ADA compliant side shared use path off of our sidewalk to connect into their path network. So the schools were very appreciative of that and thought it would fit in very well with them as well. So lastly, I want to cover the project timeline. So what we have is the project was actually already bid. The bid occurred November 1st in 2022, and council accepted that bid on November 14th, this past Monday. The utility relocations are ongoing. There's not really much action on site right now. A lot of it is just getting materials and items together, but we do expect those to really probably get moving forward here in January. And then construction will likely begin in February and March with some small tree removals in the area of the site, and then hit full swing here in March once the winter breaks with the south side of Bridge Street. So the reconstruction area there between Bridge and Sells Alley. Once that's substantially complete, the project will move into the north side of Franklin Street, the actual extension itself. And then the third phase will be getting the project open to traffic and finishing off a lot of that landscaping and overall aesthetics to the project. The overall completion date is November of 2023. Again, that's barring any kind of material problems that seem to be plaguing construction in general now. But so far, we've heard positive feedback that they're going to be able to get most of their stuff, it sounds like. So assuming that doesn't change, we'll keep moving and pressing forward on that. And then lastly, when in discussions with planning, we did want to discuss some of the landscaping items on the private sites in particular. So the landscaping related to the project within the Darby lot are actually appropriate for administrative approval, which would be the city manager. And that will be processed by our staff here in November. However, we certainly welcome any kind of comment or feedback from the board on the proposed landscaping.
Thank you.
Of course.
You've had a lot to coordinate here.
Yeah, there's quite a bit.
Yeah, all the different owners and then the different utilities. Any questions?
What's the budget for this? Just, I'm probably in a council meeting somewhere, but
The bid or the budget?
the budget.
The budget. So our construction budget this year was 2.7 million.
That's a good project.
It's gonna look great. Like it.
Yeah, no other, I mean, it looks good. Thank you.
And I don't think any of us, we usually defer to Sarah regarding the landscape. So I don't think any of us have any input there.
No,
Okay.
it looks really good. I think it'll be a great improvement to the area.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry you had to sit through.
Oh, no. That's all right. Part of the process.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything this board can do that helps in a process like that? You ask about open for feedback regarding the landscape, if we have any feedback. Is there anything a board like this can do that helps you?
Honestly, we do our best to coordinate with planning and work through a lot of those items. So hopefully a lot of that is answered prior to this. Maybe clarifications on occasion if there are issues that come up. And then I believe we are actually on the agenda for January for one of the properties on this location to present it as a minor project to ARB.
Okay, thanks. Okay. All right. All right, then item 10 on our agenda is a presentation by City Transportation and Mobility to discuss curb management pilots.
All right, lucky number 10. Good evening, members of ARB. I'm Tina Waskowitz. There's no quiz on that spelling, I promise. I'm with our Transportation and Mobility Division, and I also have Tom Brown. Excuse me, that was a long sit without speaking. So I also have Tom Brown with me. He's with Nelson Nygaard, and they are the consulting team that's helping us and supporting us through this project that we're going to present. Oh, which I need to actually do. Give me just a moment here. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. So the Division of Transportation and Mobility is rather new to the city of Dublin. We've only been around a little over a year. We were part of Brian's team actually prior to that and started to just focus on a few different areas of transportation and mobility, as you might expect from the name, right? And I think one of our team members, J.M. Rayburn, has touched base with this board earlier about mobility ideas and concepts in the historic district. So just to kind of connect the dots for you there. We also take care of the city's traffic operations, so traffic signals, signs, things like that within the right-of-way, mobility, as I mentioned, so shared scooters, bikes, microtransit, our shuttle that we provide for the first mile, last mile. We take a look at traffic safety. We also shepherd the Connected Dublin efforts, so anything sort of smart city related falls within our general group. Transportation planning, as you might imagine, is a big part of what we do in our group. And we also take care of our wayfinding and parking. So we've been partnered with Sarah on this project and planning and working closely with their group as well on some parking solutions and focusing on historic Dublin as well as Bridge Park areas for this project. So we're very interested in seeing what's happening at the curbside. So we have this study underway to understand, organize, ease operations, and reduce conflicts at the competing needs of the curbside. This study really builds from some earlier studies that we've done, especially in historic Dublin, that have identified needs and opportunities prior to COVID and the parking garage that's been built near the library. So some of the challenges are the same: loading and unloading, high demand for on-street parking. I actually heard you mention that specifically in one of the earlier cases tonight. And some of the challenges are new, right? So more food pickup, delivery activity happening in these areas. There's scooters, which we didn't have in the past, micro transit, the shuttle, and more pedestrian activity as more and more things build in this area. We also create our own conflicts. So we are creating a comprehensive plan for the curb space in both historic Dublin and Bridge Park along the curbside to help manage these conflicting uses. And when we say curbside, we're really thinking about these three areas. So the curb zone is the more traditional parking lane area. The furnishing zone is where we have some vertical elements like street trees, street lights, signs, maybe some bike parking along the way. And then the sidewalk zone, where we really want to focus on that clear walkway for the pedestrians and that activity to occur. So the project was broken into 2 phases. I got lost on my slides. Got a little excited. Sorry about that. Let me step through here. So there were 2 phases of the study. We've gotten most of the phase 1 portion of the project completed, working on wrapping phase 1 up and leading into phase 2, which is why we wanted to present this information for you tonight. So phase 1 included a best practice review and quite a bit of public engagement. Nelson Nygaard helped us coordinate several focus groups with key stakeholders in these areas. And we also published an online survey, which is still available on our website if anyone wants to go take the survey about parking. And they've also performed for us a parking inventory and occupancy to kind of get our arms wrapped around where we're at in these areas. And right now we're leading into phase 2 with an implementation guide and a toolbox with curbside management tools and technology. So one of the main goals for us here, particularly in the historic district, is to make the area more accessible, easier to navigate, right? By increasing the awareness of ample and free off-street parking and garages, and promoting the park once philosophy, right? To move around the district without getting back into a vehicle for every trip. Moving into phase 2 is really looking at physical technology to help us understand and promote these concepts that we're dealing with, right? So there's 2 pieces to this phase 2 technology pilot. The first focus area is on street, right? So along North High Street, where we're talking about all of that conflict happening, all the deliveries, loading and unloading occurring, we want to be able to identify double parking conflicts, occupancy within the parking areas, and by vehicle type what's happening, along with our pedestrian and vulnerable users. Off-street is just talking about basically the parking garage, parking lots, and promoting those areas for folks who don't need to be in the street. So looking first at the on-street areas, our areas of focus initially for deploying equipment in phase 2 are North High Street and Longshore Street. So again, those areas that you think of as those kind of busy, congested areas, we want to put our resources there first, understand what's happening in those on-street spaces. And those will probably be 2 different vendors, right? So we want to test multiple technologies to gain the best understanding in a 12-month period with what we would want to move forward in the future beyond the pilot as the city moves forward and advances these technologies. So one of the solutions is shown here, which is a camera a power source, which happens to be a solar panel in this case, and then some sort of either communication or computing device. And these would be mounted to our existing light poles. So within the city's infrastructure, within the public right-of-way, is how we would start to capture some of this information that we're looking to find out. And then in the off-street part of the study, we're really looking for an increase in occupancy in those areas, right? Like get people to the garage and then let them be pedestrians throughout the district, both districts. So what we want to do is, first of all, start to understand how that technology could work. We don't monitor our garages right now for ins and outs, so want to be able to start collecting what that is and then displaying that out to the public. So that there's probably a lag of about 6 months between understanding how that we're going to collect that data and interpret it, and then rolling it out to the public via an app or a display of some sort. And these are the parking locations that we're primarily focused on based on the Nelson Nygaard study for the occupancy. So the library garage, of course, in historic Dublin we'll be looking at. And then Block B and Block D are the ones that are were recorded as the highest occupancy when we did the studies under the phase 1. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And I would love to answer any questions that you might have for me tonight.
I have a couple, since nobody else. The conflict that Michael was pointing out earlier with the trash pickup, is that, you will be monitoring, it sounds like that. Is that something you've had to address already in these situations?
Yes. So first of all, yes, it's going to be something that we're monitoring. That's going to be one of the main metrics that we're looking for that technology to test in the phase 2 pilots, to see how much we can identify, how quickly we can identify it, and how quickly we can react to that. The second part of that was, have we had to deal with it? Yes. So one very fortunate thing, particularly for historic Dublin, was opening that parking garage. That was a game changer, 2018, right? We went from feeling so much pressure on that curbside parking to all of a sudden having at least a minor relief for those competing needs along the curb, and having that be free, available parking has really helped decrease the conflict on the curb. I will say loading and unloading is probably one of our highest priorities for conflict reduction, right? Those delivery drivers they're trying to do their job, right? They want to get in, get out, get their product delivered to who they need to, and move on. We appreciate that, but also need them to respect and do that in a safe manner within our environment and the public right away.
The other question I had, and I've often wondered, we approve so many projects where we give them parking waivers and just say, oh, this will fit in the garage. And is somebody tabulating how much pressure, when we give these waivers, we put on the garage and what the capacity of that garage is at peak times?
We have done that internally with planning. So planning is the keeper of those parking variances and allowances. And we've gone back, and I can't tell you exactly if it's with every case or if it's just periodically where we verify that. But I will tell you, when Nelson Nygaard came to do, yes, if you want to help us, yeah, either way is fine, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna tee you up here, so I think that maybe you have some better information from the inventory too that you've just performed.
And if you'd introduce yourself and give us your address.
Press this. Am I on? Tom Brown, 3038 Yorkshire Road, Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Thank you. Yeah, so I think that's one of the longer term value adds of the off-street technology that we'll be piloting is the first benefit we're trying to secure is pushing out information, because what we found with our counts is there is always significant availability in all of the garages. But you probably have experienced this yourself. If there's 4 levels of a garage and you don't find spaces until the 4th level, you find those first 3 levels that you circulate, you spend wondering, are you going to find parking or not, right? And so it's more about reassuring people that there is plenty of parking in all of the garages. You've heard other stories, but there is. We need that to be accurate before we push that out, so that it is verified when people show up. Like I said, a secondary benefit of that will be to continually be able to track what is the impact of that latest development that you approved. In theory, there was capacity there to support some of the demand with existing supply. Is that what's actually happening? And like I said, right now, whatever you've approved in the past has worked out well, because there is significant capacity in the garages. But at some point, that may change, and this way you'll know. Going back to the first question, I think the trash pickup is an interesting example of something that might not be a reason why you pilot this or you invest in these cameras, but that is something that we're evaluating the different technologies, and one of the technologies would be testing is has the capacity to capture all of that. So you see something, oh, there's trash pickup conflicts. Mostly what we're looking for are those conflicts, whether it's a trash truck or a DoorDash driver. We'll be able to see patterns of, are they interacting with pedestrians in a way that's unsafe? Are they double parked? For how long, at what time, et cetera. So in some ways, it'll be interesting to see what all is documented, but the primary driver was really just the sense that there's sort of increased messiness at the curb. And particularly the DoorDash, Uber Eats drivers, there's not a lot of easy solutions because they're in and out so fast. And unlike a Uber or Lyft driver, you can't control them with a geofencing really. So first step, we want to document it, know where it's happening, know where the impacts are most significant, and then figure out what tools the city has to address it in a way that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know a lot of it too is, let alone the double parking, but forcing people to go left to center. And that was kind of the issue.
Exactly.
Down when I was there, because you got kids trying to go through a light there, but the truck's blocking it. So the car goes left to center, and then they're right there at the intersection. So, and that's why I said trash trucks are big, So anyway, that's great discussion. Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity for this. So
will the
I'm glad
data
you're doing it?
will the data show where the intersection? Because for me, at the end of the day, I don't know how many on North High Street, but curb parking, I always thought, I don't know why we have it, right? I mean, will this study start to think about, do we have enough parking? Could that go away and only be, let's say, could be only ADA or something else? Because I think of all the places in Dublin, I'm surprised some had something. Well, maybe things do happen. Somebody hasn't gotten hurt out there with people trying to pass. So will that study start to say, okay, I see there's 20 spots. Okay, I can start to see what the library parking lot has. Okay, maybe we can reallocate those to something that is less intensive in one way, and potentially safer. So that should spin out of what you'll see through these studies.
That's our goal for sure. So part of that is just seeing it, right? Like having the technology in the phase 2 pilot to be able to understand and capture that. And then the toolbox and implementation kit is going to help us shape how we want to use that space and most efficiently and most effectively use those spaces along the curb.
Okay. And then eventually, I mean, as we say, let's say something we approved today, there's going to be 30 more people eating dinner in some place, and somehow we'll have a metric to say, hey, they're going to park someplace, and you'll get that data to say, maybe we'll run out of parking, right? Because at some point we'll have to manage. So you'll have some algorithm in the background that you can plug in and say, hey, these are the amount of people we're going to see every day with a new restaurant. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty low tech, actually. The number of trips generated by certain land uses is something that we do pretty regularly with planning and coordinate that. part of it. I will say that we're not always going to build our way out of the solution, right? It may not be parking in your car on the street is the answer.
Absolutely. Maybe we come up with another solution. There's not enough and we have to get people in and out some other.
Right.
Yep,
Maybe
absolutely.
mobility is the answer. Maybe microtransit. Maybe it's something else entirely. But yeah, we're always looking at those balances and trade-offs for sure.
Because I think once you have that, then people understand that if you see it visually, I'm going to go down and have dinner. Oh, it's full. Mobility has a way to say, oh, okay, I'll go park wherever. And so I can still get to Oscars or to
Absolutely.
So if we somehow marry all that together, then people see it and then they can make an adaptation before they pull out to get to the fourth floor. And then they're not very happy when there's no parking.
Right. Yeah, and I think
Well,
that ties
good.
right back to the conversation that J.M. Rayburn had here a couple months ago, right, with the scooters and the mobility hubs and trying to find those locations. So part of that is going to be shared bicycles. So that could also be a good synergy with this project and distributing those resources.
Yep. Yep.
I know people want to go. I have one last question. Carrie, it's actually a follow-up on your first question about trash. Can the city create an ordinance to limit pickups for things like trash in the district to certain hours?
That's probably a question for legal. Sarah, do you have any advice on that?
I am thinking, if I'm remembering correctly, there is something regarding restaurants for delivery and pickup, and I don't know if it specifically says trash. And if it doesn't, that's something that, we might consider amending.
That's a way to get out of the dilemma that you're pointing
Right.
out.
Yeah, I don't see why
Yeah.
it couldn't legally. And there's no reason
As
it can't.
we continue to add more of these places that need
We're
more
often restricted
pickups
to
and
before 7 a.m., things like that.
Yeah. But it might be something that we could explore.
yeah,
Of course, you'll
good
get
call.
the Rumpke lobbying firm to come in and counter that. But
All right. I don't think we have any
I was
other.
just going to ask you what these cameras capture.
There's a couple of different technologies, and they're not actually even all cameras. So some of it is LiDAR technology, which is also a very fascinating solution from my perspective. Some of the cameras pick up a stream. So it's a constant video, just like you would use with your phone, right? Some of them capture a photo a certain number of times in a minute or a second, because there's enough static. It's not in motion constantly, so you don't necessarily need to record a stream because that takes a lot of data, right? A lot of memory and a lot of power and all of that other stuff. So part of our goal in testing multiple technologies is to see where we want to land with that data collection and to see what's better for us as the city of Dublin as the solution. Is it LiDAR? Is it video stream? Is it capturing X number of frames per minute per second? So this is all stuff that we're learning as we entered into this phase 2 tech pilot stage. Good question. Sarah, do you have a response on the trash pickup?
You saw our big excitement over here. Under eating and drinking establishments and the specific standards for those uses, it says deliveries and refuse, such as but not limited to grease traps, recycling, and trash, pickup in Historic South District shall be limited to between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. We could certainly expand that if it was felt to be necessary.
Great. Okay, that's a start.
So it's limited to between 8 and 4? I know
Yeah, so my guess on that,
Yeah,
if I could chime in, is probably it's residential and it's noisy, right? So they're wanting to limit that 3 a.m. dumpster hitting the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also the peak time, so it's a curb use issue.
Yep. It's interesting that it's just South High though, because there is more residents in that area.
Right, which is where, yeah. The North High, that particular place was going to be a bakery, whether that fits the definition of an eating and whatever that establishment was. Yeah, it may not
Yep,
meet that
where the trash
definition.
cans are gonna sit.
Okay. It's an eat-in bakery.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentations. And thanks
Thanks for your time.
patience.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. All right, Sarah, any communications?
Yes, and first, thank you again to all of our guests. And we appreciate hearing about these projects that are going on in the district that you all may get questions about or want to know what on earth is going on.
It's very helpful. Sean, years ago, Sean had asked, said, why aren't we finding out what's going on?
Yeah.
So it's really, really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yep. So thank you again, everybody. I have a number of announcements, but very quickly. Next year's proposed hearing dates are in front of you. Please review and comment on them. We've tried to provide very specific dates for things like training sessions, joint meetings, work sessions, so that we can all plan a little bit more around our schedules. These should be ready to adopt in December, so you will see that on your agenda. So if you have any concerns or anything, please let me know. Also, a reminder, please don't forget your cybersecurity training.
I'm done.
Yep, this
You
is
would be.
due by November 25th. And it's available through Cornerstone. If anybody besides Hillary needs that link, I can get that for you. Let me know. Yeah, I know, I know, but I also, before I do that, is everybody going to be here on December 14th?
Yes.
Terrific. Okay, perfect. And then the last thing is, ta-da,
Ta-da.
from the SHPO's office for our code and guidelines. So we received this a couple of weekends ago. And there'll be an article about it in the Monday morning update. I think you all ought to have access to that. And probably some, whoop whoop on social media, so. Thanks. And I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
And everybody has noticed our website's changing.
And everybody knows that it's not quite working.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if other board
Yes.
members have.
It has a few bugs, but
Glitches.
folks are working on it.
All right, okay.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
all right. We're adjourned, okay. Let us know, Taylor, when we're off the air.